Chapter 2137. Partiality. Long Yueshi had died. A celestial king of her generation, a ninth heaven overlord, practically the strongest existence in the celestial realm, someone who had endured countless epochs, and borne witness to changes over the ages, had still finally died and returned to dust. If it were not for the fact that she could not let it go, she should have died long ago, several epochs ago. Grand Elder. The members of the Rock Palace all wept. Even Elder Fuyun showed a hint of grief in her expression. She had sided with the Four Seas Palace because she was incredibly realistic. However, it did not mean that her heart was already leaning in favor of the Four Seas Palace. Long live the Imperial Empress. The members of the Four Seas Palace, meanwhile, were all excited. With Long Yueshi's death, the Rock Palace was finally conquered. Shang Jiwei did not feel any kind of happiness. Instead, she showed a disappointed and frustrated expression. Perhaps it was Long Yueshi's final words that pierced her heart. Long ago, several epochs ago, she had already lost to Tianyun, and it was a complete, absolute loss at that. Tianyun and Yuan Shang had both long since died, and now Long Yueshi had also died. So what if Shang Jiwei was the one to have the last laugh? When the flames of her vengeance were calmed, what meaning would there be left to her life? After I kill Tianyun's reincarnation, and settle the matters of the palace, I will go to the doorway of darkness, and battle with those elites from the foreign realm right until I bleed the last drop of my blood, she murmured. Pacifying the storm of darkness, this was Yuan Shang's strongest wish. Though I cannot realize it on his behalf, I will definitely try my best. Long Yueshi, though you have been my lifelong enemy, any crimes would be cleared with death. Taking into consideration the fact that you, too, are a ninth heaven celestial king, I shall offer you a funeral, she declared loudly. With a wave of her hand, boom, the indestructible rock mountains were forcibly torn apart, as if they were merely a painting being unfurled. With another wave of her hand, she delivered Long Yueshi's body into the mountain range that was torn open. Then, with her clapping her hands together, the mountains immediately returned to their original state, as if nothing had happened previously at all. This was the strength of a ninth heaven celestial king. Others would only manage to bump a few rocks off after fighting for so long, but she could easily cause damage. Enough, she spoke up again, filled with dominance. Greetings, Imperial Empress. The spiritual mountain celestial king descended, half kneeling in front of her, and appearing incredibly reverent, but the lowered gaze held a very strong adoration. He has always loved Shang Jiwei, and the fact that he was willing to stay as a number 2 in the Four Seas Palace was also because of this. However, he had never dared to confess his feelings, fearing that after he was rejected, Shang Jiwei would expel him from the Four Seas Palace. Xiao Gu had his own principles when he was mimicking and impersonating. Though he saw how the spiritual mountain celestial king had half knelt, he did not kneel down alongside him, but rather went off in a daze on the sidelines. So it's old bone demon. Shang Jiwei looked at Xiao Gu. It was rumored that you had already died several epochs ago, and it looks like the rumors were not false. The consciousness that was born from the celestial bone has already died out, and the intelligence of this newly born one is no more than that of a 3-year-old. She had excellent insight, and could tell Xiao Gu's origins with a single glance. So it's old bone demon. Xiao Gu was very interested, and began mimicking her words. Shang Jiwei did not take offense. Her gaze turned to Ling Han, a complex expression appearing on her face. After a long while she finally said, "You are Yuan Shang's disciple, and that would make you my disciple, my child." When these words were spoken, a storm of protest rose among the members of the Four Seas Palace. A disciple was one thing, as Shang Jiwei had a total of 3 personal disciples. But a child. Shang Jiwei had never married, so it was naturally impossible that she would have any children. In that case, what kind of privileges would Ling Han have? Becoming the young imperial emperor of Four Seas Palace. Though everyone was unwilling to accept this, no one dared to say anything. They could only feel envy. The Four Seas Palace had always been ruled by Shang Jiwei's word alone. This was also the privilege due to a ninth heaven celestial king, the high and lofty status of a divinity. You are Yuan Shang's disciple. Xiao Gu was also mimicking from the side, copying Shang Jiwei's expression and actions completely, and causing Ling Han to involuntarily feel gloomy. You actually want to become my father as well? Hand over Tianyun's reincarnation. Shang Jiwei looked at Ling Han, her eyes holding benevolence. She was really treating Ling Han like her own child. Hand over Tianyun's, Xiaogu repeated. Ling Han pretended to be puzzled and asked, what Tianyun's reincarnation? Tianyun's reincarnation has definitely not left the rock heaven, and she is not in any one spatial god tool, either. Then there is only one possibility, and that is she is inside that Yuan Sheng forged, spatial god tool stated calmly. However, she deliberately skipped over the name of the Tower of Three Realms. It seemed like she knew that the effects of this name were overwhelming. Xiaogu still copied, completely shamelessly. Ling Han was inwardly stunned. Shang Jiwei had only done a sweep with her divine sense, and she had already scanned over every single person's spatial god tool. As expected of a ninth heaven celestial king, she was too strong. However, there was absolutely no way that he would hand Hu Niu over. Thus he said, Aunt Wei, Senior Tianyun has long since died. The Hu Niu now is only Hu Niu. She only possesses the martial imprint of Senior Tianyun, yet is a completely independent personality. She is only a junior of yours, so why should you lower yourself to her level? To play the fool with a ninth heaven celestial king was clearly a very stupid thing to do. However, Ling Han was truly shameless, and had even directly addressed her as Aunt Wei, causing the members of the Four Seas Palace to exclaim at his shamelessness. He was really too quick to go along with her lead. However, this address of Aunt Wei made Shang Jiwei feel elated. If she had been able to lay down her love for Yuan Shang, she would not have possibly targeted the Rock Palace for so many years. As the saying went, the stronger the love, the stronger the hate that would result. What made her most despondent was the fact that she had never gotten any recognition. However, when Ling Han addressed her as Aunt Wei, it was equivalent to giving her status on behalf of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. To Shang Jiwei, what could be more important than that? Involuntarily she smiled and said, You have a really sweet tongue, child. You have a really. Xiaogu copied her words earnestly and tirelessly. However, as long as it is related to Tianyun, then it has to be destroyed. I cannot allow any sliver of her to remain in this world. Shang Jiwei declared decisively. Her hatred towards Tianyun was not something that could be resolved by just the words, Aunt Wei. Aunt Wei, it is easy to make enemies, but hard to resolve grudges. It would be better that you just let it go, Ling Han advised from the sidelines. Shang Jiwei's eyes blazed. You are merely besotted by that little girl's beauty. It is not true love. I have a disciple who is as beautiful as a celestial maiden. She is definitely in no way inferior to that little girl. Her temperament is gentle, and she has excellent natural talent in cultivation. I will make the decision and betroth her to you. She would be a truly good match for you. Hearing these words, the members of the Four Seas Palace were all dumbfounded. Shang Jiwei had a total of 3 disciples, but only one of them was female. Thus, she had to be speaking of Holy Daughter and Ran. True, Holy Daughter and Ran was extraordinarily talented in cultivation, and practically looked like she would become the second Shang Jiwei. Furthermore, she was also as beautiful as a celestial maiden. She was a truly exquisite beauty, but to say that she had a gentle temperament. Everyone shook their heads in unison, filled with disbelief. Holy Daughter and Ran definitely had absolutely no relation with these words. This woman was incredibly proud, just like a peacock spreading its tail feathers. To say nothing of peers, even in Immortal Palace tier and Ascending Origin tier, there were not many that she truly paid any regard to. If she knew that Shang Jiwei wanted to marry her off to Ling Han, she would probably explode. Furthermore, just how much did Shang Jiwei dote on Ling Han? Shang Jiwei had always considered Holy Daughter and Ran as her own daughter, yet now she was easily betrothing her hand to another like this. She did not even bother to ask, so it was clear just how partial she was to Ling Han, right? This was very much to be envied. The members of the Four Seas Palace all looked at Ling Han, and even a great many celestial kings were no exception. Chapter 2138. Four Seas City. Ling Han shook his head and smiled. Aunt Wei, I already have a beautiful wife, and am fully satisfied. There is no need to involve others for my sake. No. Shang Jiwei shook her head resolutely. She had not succeeded in her own romance, which caused her to develop an extremist personality. Moreover, Ling Han was the heir of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, while An Ran was her disciple. As she saw it, this was the continuation of the affections from the previous generation, and could compensate for her regrets. One refused repeatedly, while the other was forcibly coercing him, and they bargained over and over again. Everyone was speechless. Was this still a ninth heaven celestial king? How was it that she now seemed like a matchmaker? Moreover, if Holy Daughter An Ran knew about this, she would definitely fly into a thunderous rage. I have not complained about you yet, and you actually dare to reject me? Or so she'd say. Child, you really are stubborn. Shang Jiwei shook her head, but her eyes were filled with doting adoration. She had truly taken Ling Han to be her own son, and was using this kind of manner to pretend that she had finally married the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. She did not bother to talk any further with Ling Han. With a grab of her hand, Ling Han could not resist at all, and she had used her great power to grab him over, turning him into a mustard seed. We return to the palace, she exclaimed. Immediately, the masses subsided like floodwaters. Meanwhile, Shang Jiwei directly tore a hole into space, and traveled to the Four Seas Palace with a leap. She had not achieved Tao through regulations of space, but having been a ninth heaven celestial king for several epochs, she had abundant time to cultivate other regulations of great Tao as well. Thus, she could naturally cast space teleportation easily. Practically every ninth heaven celestial king was strong in every area. Thus, to dominate over your peers, and become an overlord even among ninth heaven celestial kings was incredibly difficult. The spiritual mountain celestial king also tore a rip into space, and followed Shang Jiwei. He had not reached ninth heaven, but even with his natural talent, breaking through one heaven would need boundless time. He would be blocked by the cultivation level barrier for several 100 million years without advancing the slightest inch. Thus, he naturally would also be cultivating other regulations in his free time, and space and time were definitely the best options for him. However, even if a celestial king was going to study these two regulations, they would need corresponding celestial medicines, or corresponding source powers of heaven and earth. Otherwise, if they just relied on their own studies, their progress could be considered extremely minor. Thus, he was very soon left so far behind Shang Jiwei that he could not even see a sign of her. His brow furrowed in a slight frown. There was something troubling him. At first, he had planned to confess his feelings to Shang Jiwei after destroying the Rock Palace because Shang Jiwei would have already severed the last link she had with her old love. Yet now, Ling Han had actually popped out, causing Shang Jiwei's motherly affection to overflow. This had disrupted his plans completely. He loved Shang Jiwei, so he naturally could not allow Shang Jiwei to have another man in her heart, even if she only considered this man as a child or nephew. Thus, he considered Ling Han as a thorn in his side. There was another reason. His disciple, Lin Xian, was also extremely captivated by An Ran, and now Shang Jiwei actually planned to betroth An Ran to Ling Han. Then, Lin Xian's hopes would naturally come to nothing. He was also very fond of this disciple of his, and considered him his own son. Now that his daughter-in-law was being taken, he was naturally displeased about it. These two reasons compounded together caused the spiritual mountain celestial king's killing intent to soar. Of course, there was definitely no possibility that he would make a move on Ling Han. If he did make a move, with Shang Jiwei's insight, she would definitely be able to tell. By then, even if Shang Jiwei did not kill him on the basis of their previous relations, she would definitely still mercilessly expel him, to say the least. It would be eternally impossible for there to be any outcome between the two of them. However, was there any need for him to act personally when killing a mere dividing soul tier? There were more than enough elites that could kill this brat. For example, his disciple, Lin Xian, was already at first secret of the Immortal Palace tier, and was a monarch tier at that. Wouldn't suppressing Ling Han be a very simple matter for him? There were too many cases of failing to pull back in time in a spar, and accidentally killing someone. Even Shang Jiwei couldn't do anything about that, could she? Moreover, with how proud An Ran was, if she found out that Shang Jiwei had betrothed her to Ling Han, she too would probably be stomping with fury, and be the first to jump out and deal with Ling Han. An Ran was also at first secret, and her battle prowess was in fact slightly superior even to Lin Xian's. There would be abundant opportunities for murder. The Four Seas Palace was quite far away from the Rock Palace. Thus, even a ninth heaven celestial king would have to spend 7 days to complete the journey. Shua, Shang Jiwei's figure flashed, and appeared in front of a majestic great city. The Four Seas Palace was not as simple as just a palace, but rather was a great city on the sea. It floated in the great ocean, as large as a star. How could a city possibly float on the ocean? It was not that the great city had been boosted by some kind of formations, and possessed the ability to stay afloat, but rather that there was a gigantic turtle below, bearing its weight. It was endlessly swimming in the ocean, and who knew how many epochs had passed. This great turtle had always been floating just like that on the surface of the ocean, and would eternally continue to float like this. The Four Seas Palace ruled over this great city, and the true location of their sect was in the core of this city. There was a chain of connected palaces, and they were all sea blue in color. Under the sunlight, they looked like rippling waves. Respects for the Imperial Empress. As Shang Jiwei passed, the people on the streets all paid their respects. Though attacking the Rock Palace had practically mobilized all the elites of the sect, there were still a great many servants and protective forces left behind to prevent their headquarters from being completely wiped out while they were off on their assault on the Rock Palace. When she arrived at the main palace, Shang Jiwei tossed out her hand, and Ling Han immediately enlarged, returning back to his original size. Tianyun's reincarnation, she said once more, but her tone was now extremely strict. Ling Han could only act shamelessly. Shaking his head, he said, "Hunyou is just Hunyou. She doesn't have much connection with Senior Tianyun." At present, he had 2 things he could fall back on. The first was Shang Jiwei's protective affections for him, and the second was the might of the Black Tower that could carry him off in flight away from this place. Small Tower was extremely confident that even a heavenly venerable tear could not possibly stop it from leaving. Of course, if he could settle matters peacefully, that was naturally best. Shang Jiwei looked at Ling Han steadily, supreme assertiveness on her beautiful face, seemingly wanting to intimidate Ling Han into giving in. Unfortunately, Ling Han was least scared of this. After a while, Shang Jiwei suddenly broke into a smile. "And Ran is about to come out of seclusion. You two should get to know each other first." If she wanted to capture Ling Han, it would naturally be a piece of cake for her, but unlocking the Tower of 3 Realms was another story. Furthermore, she also truly considered Ling Han as her own descendant, and did not want to force Ling Han into doing something that he did not wish to. Thus, she came up with a very good idea. Have Ling Han fall for Ran, and he naturally would forget about Tianyun's reincarnation, and obediently hand her over. Though Ling Han did not want to get to know that Ran, since Shang Jiwei did not speak about the matter of Hunyou, he naturally would not be reminding her. In any case, affections had to be mutual. If he stayed cool and indifferent on his side, how could Ran actually fall in love with him? 1. For the time being that was the plan. He nodded. "I'll do as you say, Aunt Wei." Shang Jiwei was very pleased. The affections of the previous generation had no outcome, and she was determined that they would be realized in this later generation. "Go on, you can walk around as you like in the palace and in the city." He could walk around wherever he liked in the palace and in the city, but another meaning to her words was that he could not leave the city. That was because Tianyun's reincarnation was still with him. Before he handed her over, Shang Jiwei would not let him leave no matter what. Ling Han excused himself, and exited the main hall. Then, he saw an elder dressed in black robes appear noiselessly. This elder bowed to him in greeting. "Young Master Ling, this old servant shall show you around first, and arrange accommodations for you as well." Chapter 2139. Holy Daughter and Ran. This black-robed elder's face was covered with wrinkles, and he looked to be in his 60s or 70s. His hair was completely white and his body slightly hunched, appearing old and decrepit. However, Ling Han did not dare to underestimate this old geezer in the slightest, because this old geezer's strength was unfathomable. He had definitely surpassed the dividing soul, and might be at the immortal palace tier or ascending origin tier. It should not be that he was a celestial king. There was no celestial king that would lower themselves to this extent. Furthermore, he was not wrapped by any strange lights either. This was a symbol of celestial king tier. Ling Han smiled. Old sir, how do I address you? I would not dare. This old servant's surname is Chen, and I am a person who takes care of trivial matters in the palace. Young Master Ling can just address me as Manager Chen, the black-robed elder said, his attitude appearing incredibly humble. Manager Chen. Ling Han bowed. I have troubled you. No trouble, no trouble. Manager Chen chuckled. Please follow me. The old man walked ahead, while Ling Han followed behind him. As they walked, Manager Chen would give Ling Han a commentary about which place was which lord's abode. For example, the spiritual mountain celestial king and the others would naturally have a palace of their own, which was like a different world inside, and was incredibly colossal. All of a sudden, Ling Han's steps paused. He felt a menacing intent enshroud him, as if there was a supreme divine sword that was just about to stab a hole through him. This old servant pays respects to holy daughter and ran. Manager Chen bent his waist in respect in a certain direction, while his gaze roamed over Ling Han, showing a hint of surprise, seemingly stunned that Ling Han had actually been able to also discover something was off. Was it a coincidence? If it was not a coincidence, then this boy's awareness was really too sensitive. A red figure flashed, and a woman leaped out. She wore a bright red body-fitting suit, outlining her pride-worthy voluptuous figure on full display. Her beauty was also astonishingly exquisite. Though she was not as beautiful as the Empress and Hunyeo, she was on par with Bewitching Maiden Ro, but her style was strikingly different. Bewitching Maiden Ro was captivatingly seductive, while this woman was fiery, just like a rose with thorns. This was Shang Jiwei's personal disciple. Her name was Anran, and she was also known as Holy Daughter Anran. Anran nodded slightly at Manager Chen. Though this person was not a celestial king, he was an old servant of the Four Seas Palace, and was deeply trusted by Shang Jiwei. Thus, she also gave him some face. Otherwise, who could garner a second glance from her if they were not a celestial king? She glanced at Ling Han again and calmly stated, "Get out immediately from the Four Seas City, and don't have any wild delusions." She was really overbearing, and did not care what Ling Han's own thoughts were at all. There was only one word that she wanted to say: scram. Ling Han chuckled and replied, "Sure, but I will have to trouble you to send me off." He indeed wanted to leave, but without handing Hunyeo over, there was absolutely no way that Shang Jiwei would deliver him out of here. Thus, if Anran could send him out of the Four Seas City, Ling Han would naturally leave happily. Anran's eyes became harsh. Send you off? What was the meaning of that? Trying to get close to her? She humphed. I'll give you 1 day's time, and if you are still staying in the city by this time tomorrow, then don't blame me for having no mercy. Having said that, she turned and left directly. Ling Han rubbed his nose. This woman was really overbearing. Who cares? Counter soldiers with arms, and water with an earth weir. Manager Chen approached and softly asked, "Young Master Ling, should the Imperial Empress step in?" This person was definitely one of Shang Jiwei's trusted aides. Would any ordinary person be qualified to have a direct audience with Shang Jiwei? And hearing his tone, it seemed that he could see her whenever he wanted to. This kind of royal favor was really strong. Ling Han shook his head. It's fine. Just let her be. Young Master Ling, you must not be careless. Holy Daughter Anran is a first secret monarch tier, and though you are also extremely talented, you are only at the dividing soul tier, after all, Manager Chen continued. Wouldn't I still have the help of Manager Chen in that case? Ling Han asked smilingly. He did not know what Manager Chen's cultivation level was, but he had an instinctive feeling that his strength definitely had to be stronger than Anran's, and much stronger at that. Manager Chen had not thought that Ling Han would reply like this, and involuntarily faltered before breaking into a smile. This brat was really interesting. He did not have the arrogance that other monarch tiers had at all, not considering every other being beneath himself like them. If it was Lin Xian, he would definitely talk tough and say that he would resolve the matter himself. However, if he really made that choice, he would only be seeking his own suffering. Of course, Manager Chen would definitely not just sit by and watch, but he would only interfere when Ling Han was in life-threatening danger. However, with these words from Ling Han, it was definitely impossible that he would delay so long before interfering. Ling Han was clearly a super monarch tier, but did not have the common ailment of stubborn pride. That was good. Since young Master Ling has already said this, I naturally would not be sitting by and watching, Manager Chen said with a slight smile. He gestured for them to continue on their way. Young Master Ling, please. Manager Chen, please. Led by Manager Chen, Ling Han toured all over the Four Seas Palace. As for Four Seas City, he could not do the same. That was because it was too large. If he were really to take a tour around there, it could not be done without a few days' time. After his tour, Manager Chen arranged accommodations for Ling Han. The matters for tomorrow should be left for tomorrow. Ling Han couldn't bother himself to think too hard, either. With a flash, his figure had already entered the Black Tower. Even if there was only one day, he had no wish to waste it, either. At present, he had already opened the upper limits to his cultivation level, and urgently wished to break through to Heaven's Soul, and after reaching Heaven's Soul, he would not need to go to any mystery realm. He would be able to rapidly condense his fifth divided soul, and aim for the true complete pinnacle of the dividing soul tier. Of course, he was presently still short of one source power of heaven and earth. Small tower, how awesome would it be to condense 9 divided souls? Ling Han asked. He was very curious about this aspect. Having 9 divided souls, just what kind of concept was that? Fifth severance could match Yang's soul, so wouldn't dividing 9 souls be capable of killing even fifth secrets? You are overthinking things, Small Tower scoffed. It had never been one to spare anyone with its words. The gap between the dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier is too wide. Even if you condensed 8 divided souls, you could not possibly match immortal palace tier. Ling Han heard the hidden meaning in its words, which also means that dividing 9 souls would be able to match it. Finally, no longer so stupid, Small Tower said. Dividing 9 souls could match immortal palace tier, but that was only limited to the first secret of the immortal palace tier. Not only was the gap between the immortal palace tier and dividing soul tier extremely wide, the gap was wide as well between every minor level. I am only short of one source power of heaven and earth, Ling Han murmured. By now, he was not too far off from Heaven's Soul, and his need of 9 source powers of heaven and earth had also suddenly become urgent. Small Tower did not say anything further. Ling Han focused hard on cultivation inside the Black Tower, and Hu Niu and the Empress were still attempting to collect the source power of heaven and earth. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Ro and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were rather unoccupied. It was naturally extremely dull to just continue cultivating. One day in the outside world would be 1,000 days inside the Black Tower. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, feeling a sliver of improvement in his cultivation level. Ling Han. Right at this moment, An Rant's cold humph was heard from outside. Here she was. Ling Han walked out, and saw that An Ran had come in without an invitation. She stood in the middle of the courtyard, and there was actually a young man beside her as well. He bore a modest smile on his face, but every movement was showing his arrogance, showing that his modest display was actually just an act. You haven't scrammed, An Ran declared coldly, appearing extremely displeased. I'm waiting for you to send me off, Ling Han said smilingly. Cheeky mouth. An Ran's beautiful eyes narrowed in a glare, and a terrifying pressure spread out like a tsunami. An Ran, allow me. That young man stretched out his arm to hold her back, and his gaze turned on Ling Han, showing a strong contempt and dislike. Chapter 2140. Bet. This young man's name was Lin Xian. He was the spiritual mountain celestial king's disciple, and was outstandingly talented. At present, his cultivation level was at first secret of immortal palace tier, and his battle prowess had reached third secret of immortal palace tier. He was a noble, great monarch tier. This also filled him with brimming confidence, and he dared to court a prodigious woman like An Ran. When he found out that Shang Ji-wei had the intention to betroth An Ran to Ling Han, he was naturally both furious and anxious. What right did Ling Han have? Lin Xian had courted An Ran for so many years, and who in the entire Four Seas Palace did not know that? If Ling Han were to rob him of his woman, how would he be able to face others in the future? Moreover, it was very possible that An Ran would inherit the position of Imperial Empress, which was also one of the reasons that he definitely could not give up. A brat that had popped out from who knew where actually dared to try and snatch his woman. He was seeking death. Of course, he only dared to just imagine killing Ling Han. This was a person that Shang Ji-wei favored greatly. Otherwise, how could she want to marry An Ran, whom she treated as her own daughter, to him? Thus, he did not dare do anything fatal to Ling Han at all, but just went along with An Ran's thoughts on expelling Ling Han from Four Seas City. This naturally would be the best of both worlds. He would have won An Ran's favor, and at the same time would not anger Shang Ziwei. Expelling Ling Han was An Ran's idea. An Ran was disdainful of Ling Han, and hearing Lin Xian speak, she nodded. Ling Han was merely an earth soul, and should either herself or Lin Xian move, they would be able to deal with him in a couple of moves. You could have escaped unscathed, Lin Xian said. He strode forwards. But since you are so determined to seek your own humiliation, you can't blame anyone for it either. Without waiting for Ling Han to answer at all, he stretched out his hand to grab out at Ling Han. Young Master Lin, please be lenient. A black figure flashed past, stepping in front of Ling Han, and allowing Lin Xian's palm strike to approach. When it landed on his body, Lin Xian's whole palm was embedded into his body. That was Manager Chen. Though Lin Xian's whole hand had sunk into his chest, he seemed to have not realized this fact at all. There was no change to his tone of voice, either. Ling Han had seen very clearly that Manager Chen's chest had turned into sand, and when this palm strike from Lin Xian landed, it had not hit anything solid, so it was naturally impossible that it would cause any kind of damage. This old geezer was definitely an ascending origin tier. A ninth heaven celestial king might not be able to lift someone else directly to the celestial king tier, but it should be no problem for the ascending origin tier. With how much Shang Ji-wei trusted Manager Chen, even if he was just at first severance or second severance, she would still be able to forcefully boost his cultivation level to the ascending origin tier. Lin Xian frowned and asked, Elder Chen, why are you stopping me? There was a seventh heaven celestial king backing Lin Xian up, and he originally should not have to be so respectful towards an ascending origin tier, and could directly address him by name. However, the person backing Manager Chen was Shang Ji-wei, and he was very much trusted by her. With this, Lin Xian could only be extremely polite. To say nothing of him, even if the spiritual mountain celestial king was here, he would at the very least not simply issue commands to Manager Chen. Manager Chen chuckled. Young Master Ling is an honored guest of our Four Seas Palace, and thus I have the duty of protecting our honored guest, so please forgive me, young Master Lin. Lin Xian was immediately speechless. The other party had used major principles to suppress him, so how was he supposed to refute? Now it is a personal matter between me and him. And Ran was not willing to give in. Elder Chen, please do not interfere. Young miss, please do not make things difficult for me either. Manager Chen showed a troubled expression. Naturally, it was impossible that An Ran would cross over Manager Chen and make a move on Ling Han. Thus, she only looked at Ling Han and said, when a man acts, he dares to take responsibility for his actions. To have another step up for you, do you not feel ashamed? Ling Han scratched his head, his expression simple and honest. You are an immortal palace tier, and I am only a dividing soul tier. How am I supposed to fight you? As long as you can parry a blow from me, I will temporarily allow you to stay here, An Ran declared proudly. This naturally was not letting Ling Han off easy, but rather that she intended to seriously injure Ling Han with this strike, or even kill him. Afterwards, even if she would be reprimanded by Shang Ji-wei, the latter would have nothing to say. In any case, with how much An Ran was doted on, worse came to worst, she would be pelted with a harsh scolding, but for her to resign herself and marry Ling Han was an absolute impossibility. One strike. Ling Han hurriedly pretended to shake his head. The gap between the dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier is really too wide. To say nothing that you are a first secret monarch tier, even if you were an ordinary first secret, I would still be killed by one strike from you. This brat was not stupid, Lin Xian thought from the sidelines. Unfortunately, he was really too greedy, or he should have known that An Ran was definitely someone way beyond his station. The difference in strength between the immortal palace tier and dividing soul tier was like the difference between heaven and earth, and that was the same for their status. Perhaps Ling Han would only be capable of remaining in the dividing soul tier for his whole life? But An Ran would at least be capable of becoming a fifth heaven celestial king, or could possibly even inherit Shang Ji-wei's legacy, and become the strongest ninth heaven celestial king in the celestial realm. Lin Xian did not know that there was still the heavenly venerable tier above ninth heaven celestial king tier. Only a very limited number of people knew this kind of secret. Even if you are outmatched, I still won't kill you. An Ran said deliberately. Her aim was to coerce Ling Han into agreeing. Are you even a man? Ling Han purposely displayed an expression of anger. Who says I am not a man? Then, come and parry a strike from me. Fine. It seemed like Ling Han could no longer tolerate being spurred on, and agreed. Lin Xian immediately showed a disdainful expression. What an idiot, to completely lose his wits just with a few words. This kind of person was not worthy of his serious regard at all. He just had to scheme a little, and he would be able to easily get him killed. Meanwhile, Manager Chen was shocked. With how Ling Han had behaved yesterday, he was clearly a calm, steady person. How could he have been so easily angered? There was something off. However, Ling Han dragged out the word. I am no idiot. Why should I allow you to hit me when there is no benefit? Unless you agree that if I can parry a strike from you, you will give me a few celestial medicines. A few celestial medicines? Brat, you are really demanding an exorbitant price. Who do you think you are? Taking a hit, and that is worth a few celestial medicines? No problem. And Ran agreed without the slightest hesitation. She was naturally being so straightforward because her killing intent was already spurred. She intended to kill Ling Han. Thus, no matter what kind of harsh conditions the latter demanded, so what? Ling Han was not so easily dismissed. He stretched out his hand. Then we'll make this bet. Take out the stakes of the bet. I fear you would renege on the bet. Do you think I would renege on our bet? An Ran was infuriated. She was the holy daughter of the Four Seas Palace and also the most favored disciple of Shang Jiwei. Her word was as good as gold, so how could she possibly break her word? In any case, if you don't take out the celestial medicines, I am not going to play. Ling Han's attitude was determined. Fine. An Ran finally nodded. Spreading open her right hand, 3 celestial medicines lay in her palm. 7 million years, 30 million years plus, and 200 billion 50 million years. Ling Han swept a glance over, and couldn't help but shake his head continuously. I say, do you think you are fooling a beggar here? Celestial medicines of this age cannot even be considered preliminary quality. An Ran was involuntarily surprised. She had not thought that Ling Han's eyes were so sharp. He had just swept an eye over them, and he had completely clearly distinguished the age of the 3 celestial medicines. She gave Ling Han a second look, a feeling of alertness rising up in her heart. It can't be that this brat is a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? But upon further thought, she shook her head inwardly. No matter what, there was absolutely no way that a dividing soul tier could match an immortal palace tier, even if it was just parrying a strike. Moreover, she was a first secret monarch tier, her battle prowess directly soaring to the height of 3rd secret. No matter how heaven-defying Ling Han was, it was useless. He would definitely be killed instantly with a strike. With another wave of her hand, 3 new celestial medicines appeared in her hand. Chapter 2141. Tricked. Only then did Ling Han break into a smile. Finally, we have some sincerity. All right, I will take a blow from you. He first took over the celestial medicines from An Ran's hands. If she refused, he would not begin the bet, either, so An Ran could only give in. However, An Ran was not concerned, either. In any case, once Ling Han died, she would be able to take back whatever she gave out. Are you done? An Ran asked impatiently. She had never accommodated someone so much before. Even if there hadn't been the previous matter of betrothal, she would have felt an impulse to kill Ling Han. Sure, of course, Ling Han replied, laughing. Young Master Ling, Manager Chen spoke up. He knew An Ran very well. She was definitely not betting with Ling Han for fun, but was rather going to take Ling Han's life without the slightest hesitation. Otherwise, she would not have been An Ran. Thus, Manager Chen wanted to advise Ling Han not to do so. At a critical moment, he would even use brute force to forcibly take the other away and leave. Ling Han was a person that Shang Jiwei had deliberately instructed that he had to take good care of, and no harm could be allowed to come to him. It's fine. Ling Han winked at Manager Chen. Manager Chen was inwardly surprised. In his impression, Ling Han was definitely not the type that would be so greedy to the point of risking his own life. What more when this was no longer a risk he was taking, but rather committing suicide? Why had Ling Han agreed to the battle? Could it be that he had some kind of special technique to deal with an immortal palace tier? Hesitating, Manager Chen took a step back, and made no further attempt to stop them. And Ran moved. Boom, her slender hands spread open, her fingers like mountains that enveloped Ling Han. Wang, Ling Han's figure trembled. The whole 30,000 meters of surrounding space warped to become multiple mirrors, and an image of Ling Han was placed in every single mirror. This. And Ran couldn't help but falter. Which of them was Ling Han's true self? This move had indeed exceeded her expectations. Ling Han had actually grasped regulations of space, and was actually so skilled at them. Boom, the attack surged past, and the space mirrors shattered one after another. The Ling Hans within them were also naturally shattered by the impact, but there were still around 1/3 of space mirrors that were unscathed. As long as there was still one spiritual void manifestation, Ling Han's true self could freely switch with it. Thus, this blow naturally did not cause the slightest bit of damage to Ling Han. Ling Han smiled. Thank you for the business. Please see yourself out. You. And Ran was first taken aback, and then flew into an abrupt fury. She naturally knew that she had fallen for Ling Han's trick. This brat was really a wolf in sheep's clothing. He had obviously grasped the regulations of space, and possessed a very strong survival ability, yet pretended to use all sorts of excuses, purposely inciting her to take out celestial medicines to use as stakes for their bet. Too devious. Too cunning. Was this still a man? Meanwhile, Manager Chen was stroking his beard and smiling slightly. So it turned out that Ling Han had this kind of ability. No wonder he dared to accept such a bet. And Ran glared at Ling Han for a while and then said, Take another blow from me. Didn't you just say that I only have to take one blow? Ling Han feigned shock. And Ran was indeed overbearing, but she was also proud at the same time. Hearing Ling Han's words, her face involuntarily reddened. With her status, she should not have made a move on a dividing soul tier, and now making a move once was not enough, and she actually wanted to do it a second time. This was too embarrassing. Do you dare take another blow from me? She could only continue to spur him on like this. Ling Han extended his hand, and then crooked a finger. Take out another 3 celestial medicines, and they all have to be over 1 billion years in age. If the celestial medicine was over 1 billion years old, then even a dividing soul tier could use them. Of course, if it was 10 billion years or 100 billion years and above, that would definitely be even better. And Ran thought for a while. She had already seen this move from Ling Han, so it was definitely impossible that she would be deceived again. Fine, again. She took out another 3 celestial medicines, and they were all over 1 billion years in age. Only someone like her, a disciple of a 9th heaven celestial king, would be that wealthy. Ling Han accepted them happily, smiling widely and stated, Come on then. And Ran moved again. This time, she had directly used a celestial technique. A desolate aura surged out. It was as if she had become a great beast that originated from the ancient era. She only had to move slightly, and she would be capable of even shattering the heaven and earth. Having fallen for Ling Han's trick once, she set aside all her previous contempt, and considered Ling Han as a real opponent. Boom, she sent out a punch. Instantly, the space was ripped apart, and the force endlessly spread out in all directions. In an instant, it had covered an area of 30,000 meters, and was still spreading out continuously. Ling Han did not use the power of space, but rather took this blow head-on. Boom, the strike immediately landed solidly on him, and his figure was sent flying like he was a cannonball. However, An Ran, Manager Chen, and Lin Xian all showed expressions of shock at the same time. That was because though Ling Han had been sent flying, his body was completely undamaged. How was this possible? Taking such a terrifying blow, Ling Han should logically have been turned into pieces. How was it possible that he was practically unharmed? There were indeed some traces of blood at the corners of his lips, but this kind of injury was completely negligible. He was still who knew how far off from actual death. With a bang, Ling Han crashed heavily into a stone pillar, and his body was immediately stopped. Then he slid back down, but before his body had landed completely on the ground, he had already stood up by himself. He had taken another blow, and he had done so with great ease. This was because he had directly channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and for a short time, his defenses would be boosted to a terrifying extent. He would be able to easily take on even the full force blow of a first secret monarch tier. And Ran and the others were gaping widely, still in a state of deep shock and astonishment. Previously, though Ling Han had also parried a strike from Ran, it had been due to a stroke of cleverness, and he had not confronted Ran directly. However, it was completely different this time round. Ling Han had sustained a blow head-on, and it was a blow with full force from Ran at that. Awesome to the extreme. With this strike, there was nothing Ran could say or complain about. However, she became even more infuriated. You obviously had that kind of strength, but why had you not used it during the first time? This guy was clearly wanting to scam her for her celestial medicines. Realization suddenly dawned on her. This guy that looked to be slightly dumb was instead a prodigy. He had deliberately lured her into the trap, tricking her twice for her celestial medicines. Had she ever been tricked before? There was definitely no such instance. Firstly, no one would dare, and secondly, with her prodigious genius, who could successfully trick her? Yet now, one such person had appeared. He had not only tricked her, he had done it twice. And Ran was angered to the point of madness. However, she had no choice but to be impressed by Ling Han's strength. This guy was really outrageously bold, and he did indeed have heaven-defying techniques. Even she had to admit that she was impressed. Good, good, good. She said the word 3 times. Even if she was angered to the point of wanting to commit murder, she could not bring herself to make another move on Ling Han. If she were to move on a dividing soul tier 3 times consecutively, her pride would not allow that. She turned and left. At least for the moment, she could not possibly come again to deal with Ling Han. Meanwhile, Lin Xian looked longer at Ling Han before turning around, and leaving as well. He had already tagged Ling Han as a powerful enemy that he had to get rid of. His display was too heaven-defying. If he broke through again to the Immortal Palace tier, then wouldn't he be completely unmatched? Young Master Ling, very well done. Manager Chen said, smiling widely, and even gave Ling Han a thumbs up. Ling Han smiled slightly. Manager Chen is too polite. This junior just has thick skin and coarse flesh. Manager Chen only smiled in response. Ling Han was both brave and smart. It was nothing as simple as just having heaven-defying defenses. Furthermore, he dared to even trick Holy Daughter and Ran. In the Four Seas Palace, this was definitely the first time it happened. Chapter 2142. Reaching Heaven's Soul quietly. Ling Han settled down in the Four Seas Palace. Every day, he would be studying Great Tao, and at the same time would also be concocting alchemical pills. Shang Ji-wei had very good patience. She had been alive for who knew how many epochs, so she naturally did not mind waiting 8 to 10 years, or even several 100 billion years. She would have this kind of patience naturally because she took Ling Han as her own son/nephew. Otherwise, she would have just killed him and been done with it. However, it was also not realistic for Ling Han to leave Four Seas City. Shang Ji-wei would definitely not allow him to leave before he handed over Hu Niu. Thus, he could only cultivate and improve his skill in alchemy. In the blink of an eye, 7 years had already passed. 7 years had passed in the outside world, and with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, as long as 7,000 years had passed, and the time spent comprehending Tao underneath the reincarnation tree was even more overwhelmingly long, and added with how Shang Ji-wei doted on him, she would deliver all kind of precious cultivation resources to him, causing his cultivation level to soar all the way to the pinnacle of Earth Soul. Ling Han estimated that if he had not had Shang Ji-wei's support, he would only have been able to reach this level in over 1,000 years. Even the Black Tower was not omnipotent. From this, it was also clear that Shang Ji-wei was really treating him like her own son, which also caused Ling Han a headache. In the future, If Hunyao were to become enemies with Shangji Wei, he would definitely be on Hunyao's side, but if he was to step in to deal with Shangji Wei, that would be really too ungrateful. Whatever, he'd put the matter aside for now. The Rock Palace possessed Yang Soul Ocean, Earth Soul Mountain, and the Sort, so considering the Four Seas Palace was its equal, would they also have this kind of mystery realm? Of course they would. Thus, when Ling Han reached peak stage Earth Soul, he went to the Heaven Soul Pool to break through. Merely a month later, he had reached consummate level, and successfully advanced to Heaven Soul tier, catching up with Hunyao, the Empress, and the others in cultivation level. And another piece of good news came. The Empress and Hunyao had subdued the source power of heaven and earth at about the same time. They managed to succeed firstly because their own natural talent in cultivation was extremely high, and they were qualified to subdue source powers of heaven and earth, and secondly because the Black Dragon King had used a secret technique to weaken the resistance of the source power of heaven and earth, thus allowing the two women to succeed easily. Otherwise, even a celestial king would need tens of millions of years to collect a source power of heaven and earth. Even with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, the two women had only spent more than 10,000 years. Ling Han. Hunyao pounced into Ling Han's arms, greedily sniffing the scent that belonged solely to him. Niao missed you to death. No slight distraction could take place when collecting a source power of heaven and earth. Otherwise, not only would all previous efforts be completely wasted, the source power of heaven and earth would also abandon you and leave. This was always only a one-time opportunity. Thus, Hunyao could only suppress her nature earlier. For her, this was really not very easily done. Ling Han laughed loudly, and spun around 3 times where he stood while hugging Hunyao. The Empress also pounced. She looked down proudly on the world, and would directly express any fondness she felt. She would not pay any regard to the thoughts of others. Ling Han also embraced the Empress, and felt as if embracing these two women in his arms was like embracing the whole world, and his heart also became incredibly steadfast. He would definitely safeguard this happiness. Niao is going out to play. Hunyao acted spoiled in Ling Han's arms for a while, and then couldn't help but call out. She had a playful nature, and she had been in seclusion for over 10,000 years continuously this time. She naturally felt suffocated. Ling Han's expression changed lightly. Shaking his head, he said, "Niao, you won't be able to leave here for the moment." "Why?" Hunyao's expression was filled with curiosity. Ling Han sighed, and after slight hesitation, he told her the truth about how the Rock Palace had already been destroyed by the Four Seas Palace. "Wah, that despicable old witch Niao will kill her." After Hunyao heard this, she was immediately howling in anger. Indeed, she had not liked how Long Yueshi would interfere in all her matters, but after so many years, she had naturally developed very strong affections for Long Yueshi, just like how a mischievous granddaughter would feel towards her grandmother. She was not so concerned about the destruction of the Rock Palace, but Long Yueshi's death still made her extremely furious. She wanted to leap out of the Black Tower and seek out Shangji Wei for vengeance. Ling Han naturally would not agree. The other party was just worrying if Hunyao was going to appear. Going out would really mean just delivering herself to her doorstep. He continuously comforted and eased her anxiety. The Empress also put aside their old grudges, and gave Hunyao a few words of advice, and added with Bewitching Maiden Ro and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden who had come later, the 4 of them finally managed to temporarily convince Hunyao. Niao is going to cultivate. Niao is going to become a heavenly venerable tier, then beat up that old witch. Hunyao declared, her eyes red. This little girl had never liked cultivation, but now she was actually announcing such a declaration, which showed how sorrowful and furious she was. Ling Han nodded. If Hunyao could focus her grief on cultivation, that would be good. But hopefully, this matter would not have any effects on the little girl's personality, and turn an originally optimistic person into a tool that only knew revenge. He exited the Black Tower, and went into a daze. 7 years had passed, and though Shangji Wei had still not forced him before, he had not found any means of leaving at all. It was like he would only be able to escape and leave when he advanced to Celestial King tier, and was qualified to match Shangji Wei in speed. What was he going to do? If Hunyao could not leave the Black Tower, then it would be forever impossible for her to break through to the Immortal Palace tier. How could that be allowed? Pang pang pang. Just as he was feeling troubled, a knock sounded at the doors. There had been countless people who had visited him throughout these 7 years. She was presently the most important person in Shang Jiwei's eyes. Everyone wanted to develop amicable relations with him. However, he had been constantly cultivating in seclusion, so others could only be left out in the cold. And now, here was a visitor. Ling Han naturally would not be surprised. He had initially wanted to enter into the Black Tower, but thinking that since he was presently stuck in a dilemma anyways, he might as well find someone he could chat with, and find distraction from his troubles. He went to open the doors, and saw a young man standing in the doorway. When he saw Ling Han, he immediately clasped his hands in greeting, and said, "My name is Fu He, and I am Lord Lin Xian's follower. Greetings, young Master Ling." One of Lin Xian's men. Ling Han naturally did not bear any positive feelings for Lin Xian, but as the saying went, one would not hit someone who smiled at you. He could not bother himself to show his displeasure to just one of his underlings, either. Thus he smiled and asked, "What is it?" "It's like this. A mystery realm has been newly discovered in the wide change heaven, attracting a great many prodigies and elites to adventure there. Lord Lin Xian and Lady An Ran have both decided to journey there." Fu He showed a very humble attitude. "Lord Lin Xian has commanded me to come and ask if young Master Ling would be interested to go with them." Of course he was, but how could Shang Jiwei actually release him? Moreover, would Lin Xian really be that kind? He was probably planning on making a move on him in the mystery realm. Ling Han smiled slightly. "If Lin Xian can convince Aunt Wei, I would indeed like to take a look. The spiritual mountain celestial king still has some influence on the Lady Imperial Empress. Since young Master Ling wishes to go, then Lord Lin Xian would naturally ask the spiritual mountain celestial king to step out, and put the suggestion forward to Lady Imperial Empress," Fu He said. Ling Han was surprised. As a great, noble celestial king, one that was at 7th heaven at that, he would actually be willing to deliberately make a trip for the sake of a minor dividing soul tier like him. It looked like the spiritual mountain celestial king was very meticulous when it came to the matters of his disciple as well if he would actually come out in the open, and create a chance for his disciple to kill him. However, if they were really able to leave the Four Seas Palace, Ling Han would really like to grab this opportunity. He had the Black Tower, and this should only be known to Shang Jiwei. Even the spiritual mountain celestial king did not know about the karmic life heavenly venerable. The matter actually progressed extraordinarily smoothly. A mere 3 days later, Manager Chen passed on a message from Shang Jiwei that he was to decide for himself whether to go to this mystery realm or not. And if he was going, there would be many dangers in the mystery realm, so he had to be extremely cautious. Chapter 2143. Another familiar person. Naturally, Ling Han chose to go. Thus, when Manager Chen brought the message back from Ling Han, Shang Jiwei deliberately summoned both him and An Ran. She did not speak of the matter of Hun Yo at all, and merely reminded them to be especially careful, as benevolent as a mother. This caused An Ran to clench her fists in anger. Initially, this had been concern and love that she enjoyed alone, yet now she had to share it with Ling Han, which made it very hard for her to accept. "Fine, you have snatched what belongs to me, and I will definitely make you suffer after we enter into the mystery realm," she internally swore. An Ran. Shang Jiwei suddenly looked towards her. "Master." An Ran hurriedly half-knelt. "I'll entrust Ling Han to you. You must not let any harm come to him," Shang Jiwei said sternly. How could she be ignorant of this disciple's personality? Thus, she directly gave her forewarning. "Ah!" An Ran's mouth gaped half open. With her personality, if she were to agree, it would be absolutely impossible that she wouldn't keep her promise. Otherwise, how would she be able to call Shang Jiwei her master again? However, to ask her to tolerate Ling Han for the whole journey, and have to guarantee his safety at the same time, how could she accept that? Shang Jiwei's slender brows furrowed in a slight frown. "Yes, master." An Ran nodded reluctantly. Only now did Shang Jiwei break into a smile. She glanced at Ling Han, then turned to look at An Ran, and felt that this was really a match made in heaven, causing her to involuntarily recall how she and the karmic life heavenly venerable would have been in their youth, if that be *tch, Tian Yun had not appeared. Involuntarily, her killing intent blazed. Boom! multiple depressions appeared in the palace. A storm surged out from the void, but was immediately sliced to pieces by her killing intent. When a ninth heaven celestial king raged, even the heaven and earth would be moved. Go on. She waved them off. Ling Han and Enran quickly left, firstly because they both had thoughts on their minds, and secondly because a ninth heaven celestial king was angered, and the pressure was too heavy to stay beside her. After some slight preparations, Ling Han and the rest then set out. This time, it was the spiritual mountain celestial king leading them. It was just a few juniors going off to adventure in a mystery realm, so why was there any need to mobilize a seventh heaven celestial king? This naturally was due to Shang Jiwei's high regard. Whether it was Enran or Ling Han, she considered them both as her own children, and naturally would not allow anything bad to happen to either of them. However, there had initially been no need for the spiritual mountain celestial king to step out for this matter personally, yet he took the initiative to take this job, so it was naturally impossible that Shang Jiwei would refuse. Thus, the spiritual mountain celestial king scooped up the three young people, and directly tore a rip into space, setting out towards the wide change heaven. A mere 5 days later he stopped. They had already arrived at the wide change heaven. The spiritual mountain celestial king's figure slowed, and slowly advanced with the three juniors. However, celestial kings had heaven-defying power. Ling Han was obviously just using normal speed to travel, yet he still did not fall back behind Enran and Lin Xian, far surpassing the speed that he could reach. In truth, Lin Xian and Enran's speed was also faster than their usual rate. This was because the spiritual mountain celestial king had boosted them with a certain celestial technique, yet they did not feel anything at all, as if this was very normal. In this way, they had only spent another day to arrive at the location of that mystery realm. Ling Han's expression became strange because he knew this place. It was not that he had been here before, but rather that he had seen it on a map. After he had won the first place in the Alchemy tournament, the prize was an ancient map, and it was said that there was a several hundred billion years old celestial medicine, hidden in the location where the hidden treasure was shown on the map, and it was within this mystery realm. What a coincidence! This mystery realm had only appeared not too long ago. Initially, this had been a sea, but in the last few years, the sea waters rapidly evaporated, revealing a gigantic pit. Then, the pit cracked apart, revealing another world. Ling Han deliberately swept a glance over the ancient map, and discovered that there should have been a transference portal that could allow entry, but some unknown change had taken place, causing the sea waters to evaporate, and the mystery realm to reveal itself. In the skies, multiple figures streaked past, flying into the mystery realm. Ling Han looked down from his lofty position, and saw that incredibly tall trees spread as far as the eye could see. They were several thousand meters tall, and the tree leaves were thick and wide, considerably larger than even the average house. And the roars of tigers and howls of wolves could vaguely be heard from beneath them. There were also birds flying out from within. Some directly flew far away, while others would fly in a circle, and then return into the mystery realm. This is a place that has been lost since the ancient age. The spiritual mountain celestial king's eyes closed slightly, his right hand making a divination beneath his sleeve. A while later, his eyes snapped open, showing an expression of surprise. The celestial realm had existed for who knew how many epochs, but people universally called what was 10 epochs ago the ancient age, and what was 100 epochs ago would be called the primitive age. Though the spiritual mountain celestial king had attained Tao many years ago, he had only been alive for over 2 epochs, and compared to the celestial realm, that was naturally negligible. It was said that a super great war had erupted before both in the ancient age and primitive age, and a great many celestial kings had died, even 9th heaven celestial kings. Thus, when something was connected with the ancient age, even he, a 7th heaven celestial king, would be tempted. Who knew, there might be a treasure that had been left after the death of a 9th heaven celestial king that would lend him a helping hand, and help him to break through to 8th heaven. Brother spiritual mountain. A cry rang out, and a man with a thin lanky build flew down towards them. Brother great clouds. When the spiritual mountain celestial king saw him, he offered him a smile, and even nodded in response. This thin man's body was wrapped with 8-colored celestial light, showing that he was an 8th heaven celestial king. Why would an 8th heaven celestial king be willing to treat the spiritual mountain celestial king as an equal? Naturally, it was because the spiritual mountain celestial king's battle prowess was too strong, and there was a place for him even among 8th heaven celestial kings. The great cloud celestial king waved a hand, and 5 young people instantly appeared by his side. These were the juniors that he had brought along with him using a celestial technique. Ling Han. One of the juniors spotted Ling Han, and uncontrollably called out. Ling Han naturally spotted him as well, and a rueful feeling involuntarily rose up in him. This world was actually quite small. Yulan Fenghua, the holy son of the Imperial Void sect. Going by that account, this great cloud celestial king should be a member of the Imperial Void sect then. So it is Brother Yulan, Ling Han replied with a smile. Meanwhile, Yulan Fenghua's expression was filled with shock. Previously, he had battled Ling Han, and the outcome was a tie, but Ling Han's cultivation level was lower than his by a minor level, causing his menacing killing intent to rise. He had deliberately chatted with the other party just to probe into Ling Han's background. He could confirm that Ling Han was just a lone cultivator, albeit one with heaven-defying good luck, and that was why he would have been so accomplished in cultivation. Thus, he extended an invitation to Ling Han, inviting him to the Imperial Void sect. There, he would be able to play Ling Han easily to death. But now he had actually seen Ling Han again, and the latter was actually with the members of the Four Seas Palace. He was a member of the Four Seas Palace. He had never heard about someone like him in the Four Seas Palace. Who is this little boy, to actually be acquainted with our holy son Yulan? The great cloud celestial king swept over him, and deliberately voiced the question. That was because he was very familiar with Yulan Fenghua, and he had never seen the latter look so stunned. At least in front of a peer of equal cultivation levels, both Ling Han and Yulan Fenghua were heaven souls. Just a mere junior. The spiritual mountain celestial king sketched over the details. If Ling Han had a grudge with the Imperial Void sect, he would not mind using them to get Ling Han killed. Thus, it was naturally impossible that he would reveal the relationship between Ling Han and Shang Jiwei. And Ran was presently angry, so she naturally would not help Ling Han explain, and it was even more so for Lin Xian. Chapter 2144. Insect Sting. I had never thought that this place was actually a lost land from the ancient age. The great cloud celestial king spoke the same words as the spiritual mountain celestial king. This 8-truth spiritual beast should have long since gone extinct, right? I never imagined that I would be able to see it again here. He extended a hand carelessly, and as origin power surged, a massive beast was instantly grabbed by a colossal 8-colored hand. No matter how hard it struggled, it was all wasted effort, and when it had been dragged in front of these 2 celestial kings, it was so scared that its tail was tightly clamped between its legs. In front of this kind of high-level celestial king, no matter how untamable and wild it would still instinctively feel fear. A celestial king represented the heaven and earth. Indeed, these 8 celestial patterns have been infused with 8 kinds of regulations of heaven and earth. The spiritual mountain celestial king waved a hand, and an extremely complex seal immediately appeared on that massive beast. Though the original 8-truth spiritual beast has not advanced into 9th heaven, with these 8 celestial patterns, it still practically conquered all its peers of 8th heaven. Ling Han heard this, and then sensed for himself. Involuntarily, he nodded inwardly. At present, he possessed 8 source powers of heaven and earth, but these 8 regulations were the closest to their source, so he was also most sensitive towards these 8 regulations. He could sense that there were 5 regulations on that seal that could resonate with him. Once the 8-truth spiritual beast advanced into severing mundane tier, it would grasp 8 regulations, so its battle prowess was definitely incredibly strong, and it would be a cinch for it to suppress all its peers. Initially, I had only made this trip on a spontaneous impulse due to extreme boredom, but I never thought that I would discover a lost land from the ancient age. The great cloud celestial king casually tossed the 8-truth spiritual beast away, and this giant beast hurriedly broke into a run and fled. It was practically scared out of its wits. Who knows what great fortune there would be, the spiritual mountain celestial king stated calmly, but there was a dominance in his tone that spoke of willingness to battle the heaven and earth itself. This was a way of expression and also a kind of confidence. Even if the other was an 8th heaven celestial king, he would not give in to him or fear him. Let the juniors go for their adventure while we take a walk, all right? The Great Cloud Celestial King asked, smiling. Sure. The Spiritual Mountain Celestial King immediately accepted. With him and the Great Cloud Celestial King, how would Ling Han and the rest be able to die? With a wave of his hand, the Great Cloud Celestial King sent the 5 juniors by his side into the Mystery Realm, and the Spiritual Mountain Celestial King also waved his hand, and delivered Ling Han and the others inside. They were practically right next to Yulan Fenghua and his group. The 2 Celestial Kings laughed, and strode off. Their target was a tall peak that pierced through the clouds in the distance. There were divine clouds immersing the skies, and possessed a primitive air. Ling Han understood inwardly. The reason that the Spiritual Mountain Celestial King had escorted them here was not just to ensure the safety of their group, but also for the purpose of monitoring him, naturally for Hunyo's sake. How could Shang-Ji Wei possibly let him go so easily? And now that the Spiritual Mountain Celestial King had left, both An Ran and Lin Xian should be taking over this duty then. In fact, the Spiritual Mountain Celestial King still had a sliver of thought following him. Hunyo only had to appear, and this thread of thought would immediately take form, and capture Hunyo. Even a thread of thought from a Celestial King could suppress ascending origin tier, and this was an unquestionable fact. Ling Han still could not let Hunyo out now, and had to find a chance to flee. He had no intention of returning to Four Seas City. Holy Daughter An Ran, Brother Lin Xian. Yulan Fenghua and the others all greeted An Ran and Lin Xian. Previously, all of them appeared slightly reserved in the presence of Celestial Kings. Among these 5 of them, aside from Yulan Fenghua who was still a heaven soul, the other 4 had all advanced into the Immortal Palace tier, and were the other holy sons and holy daughter of the Imperial Void Sect. However, 4 of these were men, with only one that was a woman. Lin Xian and An Ran clearly knew them, and greeted them back. This is... The man named Ai Kai Feng looked towards Ling Han, and showed an expression of ponderment. Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly. Ai Kai Feng responded with a reserved smile, though a hint of disdain was revealed in the corners of his lips. He was a first secret monarch tier, while the other was only a heavenly emperor. The gap in strength between the 2 of them was like the gap between heaven and earth, so he naturally disdained even talking to Ling Han. This would degrade his own status. He was not the only one, for the other 3 were the same. Their names were Lao Liang, Bi Ziwen, and Di Tongxin, respectively. They merely conversed cordially with Lin Xian and An Ran, but did not cast a second look at Ling Han. The truth was the fact that they even bothered to ask Ling Han's name was already giving him enough credit. Neither An Ran nor Lin Xian had the intention to explain who Ling Han was. The 8 of them set out, and began walking in the forest. They were not Celestial Kings, so how could they possibly dare to act rash in this land from the ancient age, and fly in the air without restraint? This dense forest was very dark, and the great trees were several thousand meters tall, with large, dense, thick leaves that blocked all light. Thankfully, they were all at the dividing soul tier at the very least, so this was naturally not much of a problem. Aya! Bi Ziwen suddenly exclaimed, and stopped walking. What is it? Lao Liang asked. Bi Ziwen raised his leg, and saw that blood was actually dripping from his foot. Everyone was stunned. Though they had not encountered enemies yet, having come to such a place, who would dare be careless? They would all definitely have covered their bodies with origin power, but Bi Ziwen had actually bled for no reason, which both confused and shocked them. What's going on? Bi Ziwen removed his sock and shoe, and saw that there was actually an insect sting stabbing into the sole of his left foot, exuding an eerily blue luster. It was just an insect sting, and had not been actively used. Bi Ziwen had only stepped on it, and it had actually pierced through his shoe and sock, and penetrated his defense of origin power and regulations, stabbing into the sole of foot. 222. Bi Ziwen's body suddenly trembled, as if he was in a sudden seizure. His eyes rolled upwards, and there was white foam gushing from the corners of his lips. Oh no, this insect sting is poisonous. With who they all were, they immediately guessed the reason. This was too terrifying, wasn't it? A great, noble Immortal Palace tier elite actually could not block an insect sting that had been broken off, and the strong poison had entered his body, further causing a monarch tier like Bi Ziwen to be unable to resist it at all. Lao Liang and the others quickly took out antidote alchemical pills and forced them into Bziwen. Not long after, Bziwen finally calmed down, but he had also passed out, releasing very deep breathing sounds. At the very least, they had finally suppressed the poison. As expected of a lost land from the ancient age, where there is danger at every step, Ai Kaifeng felt lingering fear. He, Lao Liang, and Di Tongxin were all first secret monarch tiers like Bziwen. Since Bziwen had been struck, then they definitely could not be spared, either. However, they were luckier, and had not stepped on that broken insect sting. But who knew if there would be other insect stings or something similar in this place? Meanwhile, Ling Han glanced at Bziwen and stated, "There is something off with his condition. It does not seem like the poison has been dispelled." "What do you know?" Ai Kaifeng immediately retorted. He had just spoken, and Ling Han replied like this. Wasn't that just purposely undermining him? The highest change antidote pill senior brother B ingested had been personally concocted by the 4-star Grandmaster Zhong Qi, capable of easily curing all poisons beneath Celestial King tier. N. Both Lao Liang and Di Tongxin nodded in unison. They naturally were absolutely trusting and reassured about Grandmaster Zhong Qi. Ling Han's mouth twitched, and he did not speak any further. He was also a 4-star Grandmaster, all right? But since these three people did not appreciate his kindness, there was no need for him to be snubbed despite his good intentions. In any case, he was not very close with Bziwen either, nor did they have any kind of relations, so what business was it of his whether the other man lived or died? Bziwen suddenly opened his mouth and released a strange sound. It sounded like it had been forced out from a dead tree. When everyone's attention was drawn to him, Bziwen's eyes suddenly snapped open. The whites of his eyes had become blue, while his pupils had become deathly pale, looking horrifyingly eerie. Chapter 2145. Corroded Corpse. The poison has really not been cured. Lin Xian deliberately laughed. Ling Han was right. Hearing these words from him, Ai Kaifeng and their group were naturally very displeased about him, but more of their antagonism was directed at Ling Han. Well, it was he that had indeed spoken such words. Naturally, the four of them thought that he was the villain. Ling Han glanced at Lin Xian. This man was really a poisonous being. This was a move to deliberately draw animosity towards him. Bziwen was moaning louder and louder, and then suddenly jumped to his feet in a bounce. His posture was extremely weird, his legs not bending, and he was just standing there as erect as a wooden stick. A spine-chilling aura exuded from those eerily pale eyes. His gaze was focused on Lao Liang, and he suddenly pounced over, opening his mouth and directing a bite at the latter's throat. "Brother B, have you gone mad?" Lao Liang hurriedly retreated. It was as if Bziwen had indeed gone mad, his mouth releasing groans that could not be heard clearly as he continued to bite fiercely at Lao Liang. The poison in senior brother B's body has not been dispersed. It would be useless to try convincing him. We have to capture him. Ai Kaifeng called out, and was the first to make his move. Lao Liang and Di Tongxin also moved quickly, suppressing Bziwen together, while Yulan Fenghua was only standing on the sidelines and watching the show. Though he was esteemed as the strongest holy son in the history of Imperial Void Sect, limited by his cultivation level, this was above his pay grade. The three moved together and attacked Bziwen in unison. However, their cultivation levels and strength were close and similar with Bziwen, so how could it be any easy matter to capture the latter? The present Bziwen did not have any consciousness at all, and was only aware of opening his mouth and biting others. He did not recognize anyone, and had no scruples, but Ai Kaifeng and the others did not dare attack him too severely. In this manner, even if they had an advantage in numbers, the advantage would be cancelled out. "Brother Lin Xian, Holy Daughter and Ran, please help us." Di Tongxin requested assistance. Lin Xian looked towards Ran, and the latter nodded. The two of them immediately moved, joining the battle. They were much less reserved in their attacks. So what if they wounded Bziwen severely? He could slowly recuperate after this. AI Kai Feng and their group could not attack conveniently, and thus did not stop Ran and Lin Xian. On the contrary, they were responsible for restraining Bi Ziwen's attacks so that Ran and Lin Xian could go all out and attack freely. Ling Han was bored and watched the show, his arms crossed over his chest. I had never really thought that Brother Ling would actually be a member of the Four Seas Palace. Yulan Fenghua walked over, shaking his head, and bringing a hint of rebuke in his expression. Brother Ling, you are really too unfriendly, hiding even this from me. Ling Han chuckled. It's a long story, and cannot be summed up in a few words. In brief, I had not deliberately meant to deceive Brother Yulan. Yulan Fenghua also smiled, his gaze flickering slightly. He was measuring his losses and gains. If he moved and got Ling Han killed, just how much trouble would it cause for himself? He thought for a moment, and an idea suddenly came to him. There was no need for him to personally move. He could borrow the help of those 4 senior brothers and senior sister. He was sure that AI Kai Feng and the others were already quite displeased with Ling Han by now. Right. This had been stirred up by Lin Xian as well. Could it be that there was internal conflict within the Four Seas Palace? This could be exploited. On the other side, the 5 great monarch tiers moving together finally suppressed Bi Ziwen. They had not even taken that many steps, and already one of their numbers was down. Just how dangerous was this mystery realm? After stowing Bi Ziwen away into a spatial god tool, the 7 of them continued their journey. This time, they had learned their lesson, keeping their feet elevated about 1 foot from the ground. In this way, there would be no need to fear that something like that insect sting would stab into the soles of their feet. They were not walking very quickly, and not long after, 9 fallen bodies appeared abruptly ahead of them. They're all dead. Judging by the extent of decomposition, they've been dead for at least several billion years. That's not right. Hasn't this mystery realm just been discovered? Furthermore, it's a lost land from the ancient age at that. How could there possibly be a corpse that is just several billion years old? They exchanged looks, and thought that there was a strangeness about this that could not be described. Could it be that several billion years ago, someone has already entered this place? That's right. It is not definite that a mystery realm has to be fully open to allow entry. In the first place, it was already here. Someone must have accidentally barged into this space, though not a single person managed to leave alive, and that was why this place has never been discovered all this while. Logically, this could be explained. The 7 people nodded. This should be the most logical explanation. The corpses have not been touched. Judging from the look of things, internal strife should have happened among the 9 of them, and they killed each other. They continued their deductions. It is also possible that they belonged to 2 different sides, and just happened to encounter one another here, which was followed by the outbreak of battle. That's also possible. There was naturally nothing much to see about the corpses. The 7 of them very quickly resumed their advance, but they had just taken a few steps when Lao Liang suddenly exclaimed in shock, and then turned around and backtracked. What is it? Everyone hurriedly followed him. Not long later, Lao Liang had already returned to where the 9 corpses were laid out. He began to flip over a body, and he found a jade pendant on that body. He carefully examined it for a while, and an expression of astonishment appeared on his face. Senior Brother Lao, what is it? AI Kai Feng asked. At first, Lao Liang did not speak. After a while he replied, I know this person. His name is Yu Kaiqing. He waved that jade pendant. And I have been the one to gift this to him too. What? Everyone was incredibly stunned by these words, and an intense coldness rose up in them. It should be known that Lao Liang's flame of life had only been burning for around 700 to 800 million years, but these corpses were at least several billion years old. In that case, how would Lao Liang have known this Yu Kaiqing? Was he seeing things? Senior Brother Lao, are you sure that this person is indeed Yu Kaiqing? Di Tongxin asked. Perhaps. Yu Kaiqing has also come here, and something happened, causing him to leave his jade pendant on this corpse? That's right. It's horribly corroded, and there is completely no way to distinguish the facial features. Lao Liang shook his head. The jade pendant has not been dropped on this corpse, but was hidden on this corpse. Hence, this person must definitely be Yu Kaiqing. Could it be that it was impossible that you have mistaken the jade pendant? These words were the doubt in everyone's mind, but no one spoke it out loud. Since Lao Liang was already so sure, mentioning such words would be equivalent to slapping him in the face. Ling Han took 2 steps forwards and carefully examined the 9 corpses. Previously, they had only been rummaging through the spatial god tools of these 9 people. There weren't any treasures inside. However, Ling Han placed his focus on their wounds this time. Insect sting. Ling Han discovered a wound on the sole of the foot of one of them, where a gleaming blue insect sting was sticking out. Everyone muttered, "Eee." It was an insect sting again. Could it be that this person had lost his senses due to the poison, and then killed all of his 8 companions, and ultimately died from the poison himself? Lao Liang continued, "Over 200 years ago, I even met Yu Kaiqing once." His words incited even more shock from the others. Could it be that Yu Kaiqing has also just entered this place, and died not too long ago? The natural environment here is unusual, causing a corpse that has only died several years or even several days ago to decompose so badly. Right at this moment, a corpse suddenly released a weird groan, exactly like how Bi Ziwen had done previously. Chapter 2146. Alive. They were really seeing things. Everyone showed an alert expression, and took a few steps back as they looked towards that corpse whose foot had been wounded. It was precisely this corpse that had released that unusual groan. Tang, this corpse suddenly stood upright, its knees straight, looking incredibly bizarre. This corpse said nothing, and immediately directed a bite at Yulan Fenghua. Yulan Fenghua was just about to move when his face paled in shock. He hurriedly retreated because the other party was far stronger than himself. Humph! Ai Kai Feng smirked coldly, and moved to parry the attack. Pang! This blow from him was too terrifying. The corpse was immediately sent flying from the force. Pang, pang, pang! It crashed through at least several hundred giant trees on its course, and only then did it finally stop. However, it had not sustained any injuries at all. Immediately, it charged back with a bounce like a sharp arrow. This time, it was Ai Kai Feng that was looking surprised. This corpse should have been only a first secret king tier when it had been alive, and now that it was dead, its battle prowess would have become weaker. And he was a first secret mystical power, and should logically have been able to destroy this corpse with a single blow. Yet that was not what had happened. He had sent this corpse flying. It was completely no match for him, but its physique was astonishingly strong, and actually stayed undamaged. Strange, very strange. There was something strange about everything in this place. It was obvious that they had been dead for only 200 years at most, yet the decomposition of the corpses had reached an extent as if they had been dead for several billion years. And now, though the person was dead, the strength of his physique was off the charts. The extent of strangeness could not be described. That corpse charged towards them, its hands spread open. Its fingernails were long and sharp, and it turned and clawed out at Ai Kai Feng. Ignorance! Ai Kai Feng smirked coldly. His strength was superior to the other by who knew how many times over, and it actually dared to attack him. Pang, pang, pang! Ai Kai Feng moved aggressively, and every blow sent that corpse flying and bouncing as if it was just a sandbag that was being beaten. But what incited fear was the fact that no matter how Ai Kai Feng attacked it, this corpse was still undamaged, as if it had been refined into divine metal. Ling Han and the others were all wondering. Could it be that this person had focused on cultivating his physique when he had been alive? Otherwise, he had only been dead for a mere 200 years at most, so he couldn't have turned into a zombie so fast, right? But that was not definite, because this corpse seemed to have decomposed for several hundred billion years, so any kind of strange change would have been logical. It should be linked to the poison, Ling Han deduced. This poison could cause one to lose his reason and commit mindless slaughter, but perhaps it could also have a great effect on the corpse after death, such that it would become indestructible. Can we capture him and study him carefully? Lin Xian suggested. Though they still held another victim of the poison captive, Bi Ziwen clearly could not be dissected for study, so they could only take this corpse for examination. Easy, AI Kaifeng declared proudly. The gap in battle prowess between both sides was like a gulf. It was one matter for him to be incapable of killing the other party, but it would be incredibly easy to capture it. His hands danced, and multiple streaks of light flowed out from the tips of his fingers. Celestial light diffused, and an indescribable might exuded. He had used a celestial technique, so his battle prowess was immediately different. He aggressively suppressed it, and that corpse very soon lay subdued on the ground. It could only chaotically struggle with its arms, yet could not stand up at all. Ah! Di Tongxin suddenly grabbed her head, her eyes shedding tears of blood. What's wrong? Everyone hurriedly asked in shock. I used my divine sense to enter into this corpse, yet did not expect that there is an indescribable darkness lying within. The evil power has directly eradicated that sliver of my divine sense. Di Tongxin's pretty face was shockingly pale, and she looked endearingly pitiful. So powerful. Everyone was stunned. The battle prowess of this corpse was not all that strong, or it would not have been so easily subdued by AI Kaifeng, but it was actually capable of eradicating a sliver of Di Tongxin's divine sense? How was this to be believed? But would Di Tongxin joke about this kind of matter? Strange, everyone declared, but also became even more cautious. They did not dare to enter this corpse using their divine sense any longer, preferring to avoid suffering the same consequences that Di Tongxin had suffered. Monarch tears like them were destined to reach the highest cultivation level of the celestial path, so their spirit definitely had to be complete. Even if the slightest sliver was lost, it would still have a powerful influence on their future cultivation levels. They wanted to cut open this corpse, but the battle previously had already proven that this corpse's physique was incredibly tough, and it could not be damaged through brute force or regulations. It was practically comparable to a celestial tool, so how were they supposed to deal with it? But there had to be some kind of massive secret hidden behind this corpse. If the secret that could strengthen the physique to the extent of divine metal could be uncovered, just what kind of height could that boost their own battle prowess to? When they thought about this, everyone's breathing became slightly heavy. Only Ling Han was completely unconcerned. He had cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and the toughness of his physique was something that even a reincarnated ninth heaven celestial king like Ji Wuming had to admit his inferiority in the face of. Naturally, he would not be envious of this kind of inhuman creature. What he was curious about was whether this corpse was really dead or otherwise. Ling Han drew out the divine demon sword, boosted it with the regulation of slaughter and metal, and then sliced at the corpse. Sparks erupted from the corpse, and it released a shrill, uncomfortable screech of friction, causing everyone to frown. What are you doing? AI Kaifeng immediately rebuked. At first, he was already very irritated, and Ling Han actually caused such an annoying noise. Was he looking for death? Ling Han merely slanted a sideways glance at him, but did not speak. He disdained from giving any regard to this kind of idiot, who had much too high an opinion of himself, and was completely self-centered, thinking that everyone should listen to him. Just go to hell. Seeing that Ling Han had actually ignored him, AI Kaifeng immediately flew into a rage. They had just entered the mystery realm, and one of their companions had gone mad, so they could only subdue him forcefully. And now, they had encountered this kind of mystifying bizarre happening, causing him to become easily angered and hot-tempered. Do you think I do not dare to touch you? AI Kaifeng threatened sinisterly. His strength was completely superior to Ling Han's, and in terms of background, the Imperial Void Sect was also a ninth heaven celestial king-level force, and the sealed emotion palace that backed them was a heavenly venerable tier-level force that had even surpassed ninth heaven celestial king tier. Thus, he could be completely unreserved in his actions as long as he was just a little bit in the right. Hee hee. Ling Han only chuckled. He had used the source power of slaughter, and 4 leaves fluttered lightly. They were obviously extremely fragile, seeming as if they could be blown over by just a breeze, yet could burst out with destructive power that was capable of slicing apart the dome of heaven. He once more delivered a slash towards the corpse. He was sure that there would be extraordinary effects from this now because his own physique was the same. A direct attack would be completely ineffective, and one could only use the power of regulation to slowly kill him. You're looking for death. AI Kaifeng roared in fury. Not only did this brat completely ignore him, he even actually dared to disobey him, and still planned to mess around with that corpse. Wasn't this just deliberately opposing him? Even if he couldn't kill Ling Han, he was determined to teach this guy a harsh lesson. Boom, he moved aggressively, and shot out a punch. Like a god of fire displaying his might, flames filled the skies. Though Ran was internally extremely displeased, since she had promised her respected master that she would take care of Ling Han, she could only suppress her own displeasure at this time. With a leap, she stood in front of Ling Han, and then stretched out her hand to parry the blow. Pang! Energy surged out madly, and the regulations of the Great Tao clashed, bursting out with soaring flames and light. Ran was completely unmoved, but AI Kaifeng took a consecutive 7 steps back as a streak of blood gushed from the palm of his hand. Holy daughter Ran, what is the meaning of this? AI Kaifeng demanded in displeasure, and felt a sliver of wariness as well. Though he was a monarch tier himself, Ran was a monarch among monarchs, and possessed the strength to suppress him. Chapter 2147. Blood Insect. Ran naturally was very unwilling to step out for Ling Han, but Shang Jiwei had issued a strict command to her, and how could she possibly dare to disobey the command of her master? She could ignore anyone in this world, but the only one she did not dare and could not disobey was Shang Jiwei. The debt of raising her, the kindness of teaching her was like the heaven and earth for her. She only looked calmly at AI Kaifeng and said, I will not interfere at other times, but this time, no one is allowed to touch a single hair on his head, or that would mean becoming enemies with me. Holy daughter Ran, you are so mighty. Lao Liang exclaimed coldly, sinister killing intent seeping from him. Though he was only an ordinary monarch tier as well, how could he allow his morale to weaken when he originated from the Imperial Void sect? Unfortunately, though Yulan Fenghua was also a top-tier monarch tier, he was only a heaven soul at present. Without advancing into the Immortal Palace tier, how could he possibly compare to Ran? Then we'll just go all out in battle. Whom would I be afraid of? Ran was extremely assertive. That was the type of woman she was. Everyone, please calm your anger. Lin Xian stepped out as mediator. His aim was to incite the members of the Imperial Void sect to target Ling Han, but he absolutely did not have the slightest intention for Ran to also be dragged in. Furthermore, he had not thought that Ran would actually step out for Ling Han's sake, either, which made him feel slightly puzzled. Look! Di Tongxin suddenly exclaimed. She was pointing at that corpse. Everyone turned their eyes in that direction, and saw that a slight bit of the corpse had actually been cut from the strike delivered by Ling Han's sharp blade. This portion was the wound on the sole of the foot of the corpse that had been pierced by the insect's sting. Initially, the wound had already scabbed over, and now it had once again been sliced open. AI Kaifeng instantly appeared slightly embarrassed. The reason for him making a move on Ling Han was that the latter was causing trouble for no reason, and causing an irritating noise. But he had not thought that the latter was not just messing around, but had really cut open this corpse. This was equivalent to slapping him in the face. What he had not managed to do, Ling Han had successfully accomplished. What a joke. The other was merely a heaven soul. No matter how overbearing AI Kaifeng was, he could say nothing at this point. He shut his mouth tightly, yet the killing intent in his heart was bubbling to its pinnacle. He could not tolerate anyone that dared to embarrass him. Yet Ling Han did not take it to heart at all. At present, AI Kaifeng was indeed stronger than him, but that was only true for the present. He only had to advance into the Immortal Palace tier, and he would be able to suppress AI Kaifeng with a flip of his hand. His concentration was completely focused on that corpse. As the divine demon sword sliced continuously, the wound was also endlessly deepening and growing larger. Finally, some clues could be perceived. Gasp! The others were only looking, and when they saw clearly, they couldn't help but inhale sharply. Within that wound, there were actually multiple tiny insects squirming. These insects were only the size of a rice grain, and were blood-red in color. It was unknown whether they had been of this color in the first place, or if they had been dyed red by blood. However, while these bugs were tiny, they exuded an incredibly evil air, inciting an extreme feeling of disgust just upon first sight. Ling Han was shocked. This kind of disgust did not originate from himself, but was rather an indescribable feeling. He just felt disgusted, and there was no reason for it. This was a hatred originating from the heavenly Tao, similar to that caused by the cultivators of the other cultivation system. The tiny insects were the same. Ling Han was not very sure. There was a large disparity between these insects and the cultivators of the other cultivation system that he had come into contact with, but there was a similar stink to them, which was indeed strange. What was stranger was the fact that this wound that had been sliced open was actually squirming, as if it had gained consciousness, and wanted to heal the wound. Humph! Lao Liang smirked coldly, and swiped out a finger, slicing towards that wound. He could not damage that corpse, but now that there was a wound, how could it be that he would still be unable to? As the finger swiped out, the regulations of the Great Tao turned into a blade that slashed onto these insects. Zhi! These insects released a sharp cry, being forcibly crushed into dust by the power of regulation. And when these insects were dead, the squirming of the wound immediately stopped, as if it had suddenly lost all life. Everyone sighed in relief. It looked like the mutation of the corpse was because of these insects. Thankfully, though the corpse could be considered indestructible, these insects could be easily killed. However, everyone's optimism immediately disappeared without a trace, because new insects were crawling out very soon, and the wound that had stopped recovering was once again squirming. Could it be that this corpse was filled entirely with insects? These insects were strange creatures of this place, crawling into this corpse and causing havoc, or was it merely because of that insect sting? If it was the former scenario, there were really thorns all over this place, and they had to be extremely cautious. And if it was the latter case, that would be even more terrifying. It was just a single insect sting, so how could it have possibly transmitted these creatures? And this insect sting had clearly been broken off, so how terrifying would the owner be? Previously, Lao Liang and the others had already said that the alchemical pill that Ziwen had ingested could heal the powerful poison of anything below Celestial King tier. But the result was the complete opposite, so what did that mean? This poison was of the Celestial King tier. Could it be that an insect that had ascended Tao and become a Celestial King had died here, its corpse scattered throughout this mystery realm? With the strength of a Celestial King, even a part that had been dropped from his body, even one who knew how many billions and billions of years had passed, would still possess the ability to easily destroy the defenses of an immortal palace tier. This land of the ancient age could possibly contain an astonishing secret, Anran said, a hint of excitement flashing over her face. The more dangerous it was, the more she longed for it, because danger also accompanied great fortune. Everyone nodded in unison, but it was not just the few of them that were here. There were also colossal beings like Celestial Kings. If there really was any great fortune, then the chance of them obtaining it was astonishingly slim. However, something like great fortune would have to depend on your own fate and good luck in the first place. It did not mean that just because one was stronger, one would definitely obtain it. Because Ling Han had not suppressed the wound of the corpse very soon recovered. This corpse also released groaning sounds, wanting to climb back to its feet. Refine him with the power of regulations. Everyone made their move, using the regulations of heaven and earth to refine the corpse. She. At this, the corpse finally stopped releasing any human-like noises, but rather issued the hum of insects, which was incredibly shrill. Pooh! The corpse suddenly exploded into a shower of blood, and then countless blood insects flew out. It was precisely the disgusting creatures that they had previously seen. They danced all over the skies, unleashing their attacks towards Ling Han and the others. Inconceivable. That corpse was clearly extremely tough, and could not be damaged through pure force. It could only be refined through the use of regulations, yet now it had suddenly exploded, as if that was just a pile of ordinary flesh and blood. It was all because of those blood insects. Blood insects surged out like a hurricane, and assaulted Yulan Fenghua first. Yulan Fenghua was enraged. Why did these insects attack him first? Could it be that they thought that he was the weakest? That was indeed the case. Though he was a super monarch tier and ran Lao Liang, and the others were all at first secret, so they naturally overwhelmed him completely, and though Ling Han was also a heaven soul, He was a freak on the level of Ji Wuming, and was also more powerful. Thus, this flock of insects attacked Yulon Fenghua first. 3,000 comic flames! He roared. Boom! A fierce flame immediately surged from his body, burning endlessly. This was a celestial technique that he had newly learned. He could only use it once he had reached Heaven's soul, and its might was truly terrifying. Multiple seals of great Tao leapt, feeling as if it was capable of melting even pseudo-divine metal into liquid metal. Instantly, large masses of insects were killed, but even more insects were charging over. Chapter 2148. Going Separate Ways. Lao Liang and the others naturally wouldn't just sit by and watch. They each sent out a palm strike, and resolved the danger for Yulon Fenghua. Boom! The swarm of insects instantly died by the masses. When they entered into a human body, they would be able to turn a corpse incredibly tough, but they themselves were extremely fragile and weak. Facing a first secret monarch tier, they had completely no power to resist. Xiao, a blood insect the size of a fist, charged out suddenly from the swarm of insects. Its mouth part was an extremely sharp sting, and it rapidly pounced on Yulon Fenghua. Mother insect! The insect queen! Everyone exclaimed loudly. Though the names were all different, the only thing that could be confirmed was that this insect should be a being like a queen bee, and was the leader of the whole swarm. Pooh! And Ran moved. With only a flick of a slender finger, an ice spike shot out like a sharp sword, and pierced that mother insect, nailing it to the trunk of a tree. The mother insect's tail waved a few times, and all its movements very soon stopped. It had finally died. With its death, the swarm of insects that were still dancing in the air immediately dropped in unison, their corpses scattered all over the ground. It looked like not only was the mother insect leading the whole swarm of insects, it was even their source of life. The moment it died, everything would be finished. Finally settled. So troublesome. To kill these insects, it was necessary to first kill the host that they were living off of, and refine it through the power of regulation, forcing the insect swarm to appear, and then kill the mother insect. Only then would one be able to completely kill them off. They all wanted to know something. What if the person that had been hit was a 4th secret or 5th secret elite, or ascending origin tier? Then they would only be able to flee in the face of that kind of opponent. But this kind of worry could not deter their determination to advance at all. The more dangerous it was, the higher the chances that an astonishing treasure could be gained. Meanwhile, Ling Han secretly drew out that old map and surveyed it. This was definitely not something as simple as just a drawing, but rather was a precious item that had been created with considerable effort. For example, when Ling Han had been outside, the map only showed the landscape of the celestial realm. However, after entering here, the map automatically enlarged, showing the conditions of the area around where Ling Han was presently at. When he inserted his divine sense, a 3-dimensional map could even appear in his mind, and he could see every single detail extremely clearly. Of course, this map had been created who knew how many years ago, and it was possible that great changes had also taken place here, and it might have become completely different from what it had been all those years ago. Yet Ling Han was more inclined towards the idea of there being no change, or only very small changes. This place should be a place that was completely cut off from the rest of the world. If changes had only taken place internally, the changes should be limited. He studied the map carefully. They were presently in a dense jungle, and if they continued onwards, there would be a great mountain, which would be followed by a lake, but the map did not show what lay behind the lake. Possibly, he would have to walk further ahead for the map to show further details. Because the map had been enlarged, there were even more details, but correspondingly, the macroscopic aspect would become smaller. There was an arrow on the map, indicating that Ling Han had to continue walking onwards. Because they now knew how frightening the insect sting was, they became even more cautious as they journeyed onwards, and they also saw even more corroded corpses. They had discovered some a bit too late, and were attacked by the corpses. However, they only wasted a little time to refine the corpses, and force out the insect swarms, which they killed. Some they discovered earlier, and managed to circle around them in time, avoiding a battle. Their luck was not too bad, as they had not encountered 4th secret, 5th secret, or even ascending origin tier victims. Otherwise, they would only be capable of fleeing in panic. Actually, Ling Han hoped that they would encounter such existences. In that way, he would be able to take advantage of the opportunity and split off from Enran and the rest, creating an opportunity for himself to sneak off. Over a dozen days later, they finally exited the dense jungle. A steep peak that pierced directly into the clouds appeared ahead of them. Divine clouds entwined around it like it was the finger of a celestial king, exuding a boundless, intimidating pressure. There must be a precious treasure on this mountain, Ai Kaifeng declared decisively. And we need to explore the mountain. Lin Xian expressed his agreement. Then let's go. Yet Ling Han did not move a single step. Shaking his head, he said, I have no interest in climbing the mountain. The map was pointing straight ahead all this while, and previously, the two great celestial kings, Great Cloud Celestial King and Spiritual Mountain Celestial King, had both come here. Even if they considered the treasure here beneath them, there were still other ascending origin tier elites. Furthermore, the celestial kings that had come here were not just limited to the two of them. If there really was some kind of treasure on the mountain, how could a dividing soul tier like himself possibly be capable of taking his share of the loot? Boom! On the peak, there would occasionally be dazzling flashes of light flickering. That was a battle on the level of ascending origin tier at least, and that could be perceived from the seals of Great Tao. Brat, I was not asking for your opinion, Ai Kaifeng retorted menacingly. He only felt furious Ling Han was again opposing him. I said that there was treasure on the mountain, and wanted to climb the mountain, yet you say you're not interested. What are you trying to say here? Lin Xian was also displeased. Ling Han, what is your cultivation level? Since we have decided to climb the mountain, what right do you have to refuse? It can't be that you're afraid, right? Haha, without even the courage to seize food from the tiger's mouth, your accomplishments will be limited as well. If you're so capable, just try and defeat an ascending origin tier, Ling Han casually retorted. Absolute nonsense. Lin Xian humphed. Ling Han crossed his arms over his chest. I dare to say that I can take over a dozen blows from an immortal palace tier, but would you dare to take over a dozen blows from an ascending origin tier? Everyone would be challenging an opponent that was a major tier superior, which was relatively fair. Lin Xian couldn't help but feel embarrassed, and could not talk back, either. Ling Han was just a freak, remaining completely unscathed even after taking 2 consecutive blows from Enran, but if it was Lin Xian, any ascending origin tier would be able to insta-kill him. How was he supposed to talk back? Ai Kaifeng and the others were stunned. Ling Han could really endure over a dozen strikes from an immortal palace tier? Wasn't that a joke? The immortal palace tier would completely crush the dividing soul tier, and this was an iron rule that anyone would know. It was a truth of the world. I don't want to go up the mountain either, Enran said. You guys can go on ahead, and I'll leave with Ling Han. I'll go with you, Lin Xian quickly declared. How could he possibly be willing to separate from Enran? And it was even less possible that he would be willing to provide a chance for Enran and Ling Han to be alone. If so, we'll go our separate ways for now. Di Tongxin smiled slightly. Sister Enran, take care. Enran nodded. She was not particularly skilled in socializing. Lin Xian, meanwhile, was an expert in making connections. After chatting for a good while with the 4 members of the Imperial Void Sect, he finally waved them goodbye, and walked next to Enran. Ling Han secretly complained about his misfortune. There were still 2 tagalongs with him. How was he supposed to throw them off his tail? Let's go, Enran stated coldly. She was already getting impatient from waiting. The 3 of them advanced, circling directly around the tall mountain, and a narrow, long lake appeared ahead of them. Though it was described as narrow, that was only speaking in relative terms when compared to its length. In fact, the width of this lake had reached several tens of thousands of meters, and large fishes could occasionally be seen leaping out of the waters, creating waves that were as tall as several hundred meters. But an eagle streaked past, and easily caught such a large fish, leaving with a flap of its wings. The weak would be prey for the strong. This was the law of the jungle. This place is even more dangerous, Enran stated calmly, though there was a strong caution in her tone. Ling Han nodded inwardly because that giant fish was shockingly at the ascending origin tier. With a hua, the lake waters split apart, and a colossal creature climbed out of the lake and onto the banks. It was shaped like a crocodile, but only had 3 legs, one in front and the other 2 at the back. Its tail was wide and thick, and it was covered with scales that looked like black iron, sharp as saws. This was not the most frightening part. What was terrifying was the aura that was released by this crocodile. 5th secret. Lin Xian immediately exclaimed, his eyes narrowing slightly. Chapter 2149. 3-legged crocodile. Lin Xian was a monarch tier, and could be invincible even with a superior gap of 2 minor levels. Thus, not only was he capable of overwhelming ordinary 3rd secrets, he could manage a battle even against ordinary 4th secrets. At least, he would be able to retreat safely. However, against a 5th secret, his only course was to die in defeat. Not just him, even Enran, who was a super monarch tier, could not possibly be the match for a 5th secret elite. Thus, when this colossal creature appeared, Lin Xian and Enran were naturally both astounded. They could not afford a battle, and forceful confrontation would result in definite death. Their only option was to run. This 3-legged crocodile immediately charged over, opening its ferocious mouth as it bit towards Ling Han and the others. "Run!" Enran exclaimed, and as her figure leapt, she did not forget to grab out at Ling Han. She had not forgotten Shang Jiwei's words that she was to protect Ling Han. Lin Xian saw this happen, and instantly went mad with jealousy. He naturally was unaware of Shang Jiwei's command, and merely thought that Enran was concerned about Ling Han. Naturally, his flames of jealousy burned brightly, wanting nothing more than to tear Ling Han into pieces. Ling Han's physique was incredibly tough, but in terms of battle prowess, he was naturally no match for a 1st secret monarch tier. Thus, Enran naturally grabbed him easily, and he could not resist in the slightest. Enran used a movement technique, as quick as light. Lin Xian followed closely behind, his eyes glowering at Ling Han, not bothering to hide his killing intent in the slightest. Ling Han saw this, and felt slightly gloomy. "I have no wish to have a woman grab me like this, either, firstly because it's embarrassing, and secondly, how am I supposed to run like this?" If Lin Xian knew the complaint that Ling Han was thinking, he would definitely be even angrier. Wasn't this just refusing to admit that he had received a benefit? Enran and Lin Xian ran, and the 3-legged crocodile pursued them. Its 3 legs stomped, yet did not touch the ground at all. It was as if the air had become the sea, and it could swim freely in the air. However, if the major tier was close enough, the speed of cultivators was actually more or less the same, unless the regulations they cultivated were specialized in fleeing. For example, the regulations of lightning, the regulations of space. Of course, not all regulations of lightning and regulations of space were specialized in speed. However, it just so happened that this 3-legged crocodile was specialized in the regulations of lightning, and regulations that were inclined towards speed at that. As its 3 legs paddled, flashes of lightning flickered behind it, causing it to burst out with astonishing speed. It had clearly started off later, and there was still a great distance between it and Ling Han's group, but as it pursued, it was rapidly shortening the distance between the 2 sides. "We can't throw it off, let's battle," Enran declared resolutely. If they encountered another 5th secret or even ascending origin tier demonic beast at this moment, then they would really be dead. All right. Lin Xian was also a monarch tier, so he naturally did not lack fighting spirit. The 2 of them stood firm, and Enran casually tossed Ling Han to the side. Then, a mirror appeared in her hands. It appeared to be quite similar to the Great Sun Heavenly King mirror. This was a replica at the Immortal Palace tier. Wang, the precious mirror replica shone, shooting out streaks of light. Some shone on Enran, while others fell on the 3-legged crocodile, and the effects produced were completely different. Those that landed on Enran boosted her battle prowess, while it seriously weakened the battle prowess of the 3-legged crocodile. Even against a 5th secret elite, this could still be extraordinarily effective. Pang! Enran charged towards the 3-legged crocodile, and exchanged a blow with this colossal creature. However, she immediately became a streak of light as she was heavily sent flying backwards. Even if her own battle prowess had been boosted, while her opponent's had been decreased, There was a total gap of 4 minor levels between the two sides, and how could it simply be compensated just because a monarch tier now had the use of a precious tool? She was still no match. Lin Xian hurriedly approached. Meanwhile, he had summoned a long spear, and as he brandished it, it was like a green dragon had risen from the sea, releasing multiple roars of a dragon. This was also a pseudo-celestial tool, and had incredible might. Unfortunately, that three-legged crocodile was too strong. Merely with a sweep of its tail, it sent Lin Xian flying backwards. However, Ran had also charged back, and restrained this three-legged crocodile, not giving it the chance to hunt Lin Xian down. The two of them battled in this manner. Taking it in turns, they would restrain the three-legged crocodile. Though they were at a complete disadvantage in this situation, if the three-legged crocodile did not manage to succeed even after a long battle, it would probably retreat on its own discreetly. Ling Han watched for a while, and knew that Ran's safety was assured. Furthermore, with the fact that Shang Jiwei was willing to let her come out, the former most probably had bestowed on her some kind of super treasure, though its use would be limited, or she would have to pay a great sacrifice for its use. His feelings towards Shang Jiwei were very conflicted. He was furious that she had killed Long Yueshi, but at the same time, the concern that Shang Jiwei showed him was genuine, and made him feel slightly touched as well. Thus, he was also concerned for this disciple of Shang Jiwei. When he was sure that she would be fine, he smiled and said, "I would not be of help even if I stayed, so I won't stay around to be a hindrance. I'll leave first." Saying this, he broke into a run and fled. "Stand right there!" Ran exclaimed furiously. Aside from agreeing to protect Ling Han, she had also been assigned another mission, and that was not to let Ling Han out of her sight. There was a person inside his spatial god tool that her master was determined to kill. She did not know why Shang Jiwei had not simply used brute force with her astonishing strength, but since Shang Jiwei had said so, she had to fulfill the mission fully. When a woman had a job, they would sometimes disregard all consequences completely. She suddenly turned and left, setting off in pursuit of Ling Han. Lin Xian was astounded. How could he possibly be capable of blocking a fifth secret-tier immortal beast on his own? Pang! He had barely even finished the thought when he was struck by a sweep of the three-legged crocodile's tail, and had been sent flying who knew how far. Thankfully, the three-legged crocodile had not set off to pursue him, but rather switched its target to Ling Han and Ran. To be more accurate, it was Ling Han that it was targeting because it could sense that there was something that it needed within Ling Han's body. Source power of heaven and earth. Ran's figure shot forwards furiously, quickly shortening the distance between herself and Ling Han. Just when it looked like he was about to surpass the maximum limit of Ran's assault range, Ling Han immediately cast void space. Space warped, and innumerable mirrors appeared. It seemed like he was everywhere. If this was any other time, Ran naturally could easily move to crush all the mirror images. Then there would be nowhere for Ling Han to hide, and he could only be captured by her. However, presently, there was still an immortal beast at the fifth secret chasing behind her, so what time would she have to make a move? She could only wait, but the three-legged crocodile was rapidly catching up to her. With a sweep of its tail, endless energy swept out madly, and those mirror images were instantly shattered. Where was Ling Han? Ran involuntarily frowned. She had been waiting for Ling Han's true self to appear, but under the sweep of the three-legged crocodile's tail, all the mirror doppelgangers were already destroyed, yet there was still no trace of Ling Han. How could someone completely disappear like that? A spatial god tool? She had not considered this possibility at all, unless it was a spatial god tool that a celestial king had forged from divine metal that should be considered a spatial celestial tool then. Otherwise, no spatial god tool could possibly hold up to this kind of blast. Because a spatial god tool could only be forged from level 20 godly metal, and could not be forged from pseudo-divine metal, the godly metal that overlapped would cause spatial effects, and could not possibly be successfully forged. And using divine metal to forge a spatial celestial tool was much too luxurious. Even with the wealth of the Four Seas Palace, they could not afford it. There were so many celestial kings waiting to use divine metal to forge celestial tools. Then where was Ling Han? Even if he had been killed with a strike from the three-legged crocodile, there should still have been some scraps left, and there should have been shattered pieces of his spirit as well. How strange! However, after the three-legged crocodile faltered for a moment, it then unleashed a fierce assault against her. Chapter 2150. Almost insta-killed. With the attack of a strong enemy, Ran naturally did not have the leisure to search for Ling Han's whereabouts, or think about exactly where the latter had gone. As she battled, she retreated, fleeing off farther and farther. I finally tossed her off my back. Ling Han came out of the Black Tower, and breathed a long sigh of relief. Now, he was really free to go anywhere he wanted. His brow immediately furrowed in a frown as he sensed a familiar aura was rapidly rushing towards him. Ling Han! Lin Xian released a furious roar, and he charged over from a distance. With him stabbing his spear into the air in front of him, suddenly the force of the spear took shape, and shot towards Ling Han like a sharp arrow. As this spear attack swept past, the ground around him all cracked, showing how frightening this blow was. Or was it rather that the surroundings of this place were extraordinarily sturdy? Otherwise, with such a sweeping blow from a first secret monarch tier, this place would have long since been turned into a great pit that was as deep and wide as an ocean. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then did not enter into the Black Tower. Instead, he turned around and ran. To enter into the Black Tower whenever he got into trouble was not advisable. Can you run? Lin Xian smirked coldly, pursuing him relentlessly. Ling Han laughed loudly, and drew out the divine demon sword. He turned around and delivered a slash, the sword chi alarming. Even if Lin Xian was a first secret monarch tier, he did not dare allow this strike to land on him. However, his strength was too powerful. He merely clenched his fist and shot out a punch, and this streak of sword chi was shattered, and his speed only paused for just a slight moment. Just how wide was the gap in speed between the Immortal Palace tier and Dividing Soul tier? Lin Xian quickly closed the distance between the two of them. His right hand wielded the spear, while his left hand was free as he blasted out an attack at Ling Han. At present, his jealousy was on full throttle, and there was no one around, either. Even if he killed Ling Han, there would be no one who would know. He could just blame it on those ferocious beasts. What would it have to do with him? Die! A vicious light flashed through Ling Han's eyes as well. He actually turned against the flow, and greeted Lin Xian's attack head-on. Pang! The force of the punch reached him. This was a blow that could break 4-star pseudo-divine metal from its force, but when it landed on Ling Han, it did not cause any kind of damage, and only sent Ling Han flying backwards. Wang wang wang. Void space unfolded, and Ling Han switched out. Immediately, he appeared behind Lin Xian, and sent out his own punch. Ha 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 ha, I have already seen this move before. Do you think I will have no precautions in place? Lin Xian countered with a smirk. He sent out his spear in a reverse stab. It was fast, accurate, vicious, and ruthless, showing fully the strength he possessed as a monarch tier. Ling Han was neither angered nor shocked, and was presently gathering momentum for a super storm. Great Clash of Source Powers. The Great Clash of Source Powers was created from combining 5 source powers of heaven and earth, so how great would its might be? It was enough to explode a hole in the void. Immediately, Lin Xian paled in great shock. This attack was so terrifying that it was completely unimaginable to him. He admitted that Ling Han was very strong, being capable of sustaining a few blows from even a first secret monarch tier, but he absolutely did not think that Ling Han's battle prowess could actually threaten him. But when this attack was launched, he immediately sensed that if he was hit, he would be dead beyond a doubt. But he had underestimated his enemy too far. Yes, he knew that Ling Han's physique was astonishingly tough, and also knew that the latter possessed an ability allowing instant movement. Thus, this counter from Ling Han was completely within his expectations. However, precisely because of this, he had been careless, because he had not taken Ling Han's strength to heart at all. Thinking of dodging only now? How could that be? Boom! A great explosion took place in the air, and the area within the surrounding 5 kilometers was completely flattened. However, when the storm of energy stopped, Lin Xian was still standing, and there was a seal with an indescribable shape flickering behind him, exuding a supreme aura. The seal bestowed by a celestial king had just managed to block that fatal blow. As expected, though the spiritual mountain celestial king had left, how could he be completely unprepared? With the protective regulations personally bestowed by a seventh heaven celestial king, even an ascending origin tier could not possibly kill Lin Xian. Of course, now that the celestial king tier seal had been used, its power would begin to disappear. Thus, this was a last resort to save his life, and could not be used easily. Lin Xian stared at Ling Han in shock, his face bearing an expression of absolute disbelief. He, a monarch tier of his era, a great and noble immortal palace tier, had actually almost been killed by a mere heaven soul, and it would be an insta-kill at that. He was still blowing his own trumpet. If he had not been given a power boost from the spiritual mountain celestial king, how could he possibly be exclaiming in shock at this moment? This person was too dangerous. Lin Xian's expression was filled with shock, but the killing intent in his heart had already reached a point of no return. At this moment, no matter who appeared, no one would be able to stop him from killing Ling Han. Without killing this brat, he would not be able to rest or eat in peace. Die! He charged out once more, but since he now knew that Ling Han had such a frightening deadly move, he naturally had prepared himself as well. If he made the same mistake twice, he would not deserve the name of a monarch tier. Of course, Ling Han sent out another strike of great clash of source powers, yet Lin Xian managed to leap away in time, and left the attack range of this move far behind him. What's wrong, not daring to take the blow? Ling Han grinned widely. I have taken all your strikes head-on, yet you don't dare to face my attacks head-on. What kind of immortal palace tier are you? Fuck, it's not me that is weak here, but rather that you are too freakish. What dividing soul tier's attack could penetrate the defenses of an immortal palace tier, and pose a threat to the latter? And how many dividing soul tiers would have defenses that could hold up to even the attack of an immortal palace tier? Ling Han was the only one. How could there be such a freak in this world? And Lin Xian could not retort, either. It was indeed he, an immortal palace tier, that was dodging, and not daring to face Ling Han's strike head-on. He was really going to kill himself with his depression. Die! 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 Lin Xian had learned his lesson, and did not approach Ling Han further. Instead, he delivered his attacks from a distance. He was superior to Ling Han by a major tier, and even if there was such a wide distance between them, he could still pose a massive threat to Ling Han with such long-distance attacks. On the other side, Ling Han's great clash of source powers was limited by distance, and could no longer become a threat to Lin Xian. In this manner, Ling Han was instantly in a crisis. Ling Han no longer lingered in battle. The great clash of source powers could only be an unexpected move, and if he could not deal with his opponent with a single blow, he would have no further chances afterwards. If he still had another source power of heaven and earth, he could just enter into the Black Tower, and directly cultivate to the consummate level of dividing 9 souls before coming back out. By then, he would be equivalent to the first secret immortal palace tier, and he would then be able to turn around and oppress Lin Xian as easily as mowing down weeds. Still trying to escape? No way! Lin Xian set off in pursuit. There was absolutely no way he was going to let his opponent leave. Today, Ling Han definitely had to die. Ling Han ignored him completely, and only used his movement technique, moving as fast as lightning. Lin Xian used all the means at his disposal, but Ling Han's methods of ensuring his own safety were varied and plentiful. Void space allowed him to have thousands and thousands of mirror images, while the indestructible Heaven Scroll allowed him to sustain attacks that were above his limits. When the indestructible True Fluid channeled, he could instantly return back to the prime of his health from a near-death state. One pursued, while the other fled. 7 days passed, and Lin Xian couldn't help but feel shocked. In such a long time, he actually failed to capture a mere heaven soul. His killing intent burned even brighter, while he was also filled with curiosity about Ling Han. This person had to have some massive secret to him, or how could he possibly be so freakish? He would kill this guy, and snatch his great fortune for himself. Thus, he strengthened his resolution. He had completely dismissed the idea of seeking the treasure that was possibly within this mystery realm from his mind, and focused on pursuing Ling Han. He was sure that if he captured Ling Han, his gains would surpass all else. Another half-month later, an unknown coldness suddenly rose up in Lin Xian. A blood-red fog was wafting right ahead, and this filled him with endless chills. Involuntarily, he stopped moving. If he chased into this fog, he would definitely die. This was his instinctive feeling. Chapter 2151. Celestial King Tier Skin. Ling Han naturally was not just running around randomly. Actually, he had been checking that old map all this while, and going in the direction indicated by the arrow. A swamp had appeared ahead of him, and a blood-red mist was wafting right above the swamp, causing an instinctive coldness to rise up within him. That substance could not be touched, or even one with his physique would be instantly turned into bones. He did not know why he would have this kind of instinctive feeling, but did not doubt it in the slightest. However, right at this moment, the ancient map suddenly released a sliver of intent within Ling Han's mind for him to continue onwards. What? Wasn't this just a map? How could it possibly release mental intent? Ling Han suddenly realized that he had underestimated the value of this map. In fact, all the people of the ancient Alchemy Tower had also made an error in judgment. The value of this map far surpassed their estimations. An inconceivable trust led Ling Han into choosing not to stop, but rather forge on ahead bravely. He drew out the ancient map, and saw that this map was exuding a blazing light, but upon closer look, he discovered that this light was actually originating from the backside of the ancient map. Because Lin Xian had ceased his pursuit, Ling Han had the time to take out the ancient map and study it closely. He flipped the map over, and saw that there was an ancient seal on the backside of the old map, and it was this seal that was glowing, exuding supreme celestial might, and blocking the surging blood mist. So weird. A strange feeling suddenly rose up in Ling Han. While he had never seen this seal before, it felt familiar to him. Xiao Gu. Right, it was precisely Xiao Gu. Ling Han suddenly recalled that this seal was astonishingly of the same trend as the bone seals on Xiao Gu. Even if he had not reached this kind of level, he could still confirm that there was a strong link between the two. He flipped through the ancient map closely, and the shock in his expression became more and more pronounced. This was human skin, Celestial King Tier skin. He had a guess. Years ago, a supreme existence had died, and a single bone had turned into Xiao Gu, while his human skin had been made into this ancient map. Xiao Gu had been a ninth heaven celestial king in the past, and who could be able to make his human skin into a map? A heavenly venerate. Ling Han couldn't help but moan secretly about the misfortune. If the ancient map had long since shown these strange signs, he might have communicated with Xiao Gu long ago, and perhaps he would have gotten some answers. However, now that the human skin was glowing, it protected Ling Han as he continuously advanced. The blood mist could not attack him, and it was as if he was walking on flat ground. Damn it! Damn it! Lin Xian roared furiously. Even he did not dare enter this kind of blood mist, but Ling Han was walking like he was on flat ground. This naturally had to be because there was a shocking treasure in Ling Han's possession that could resist the corrosion of the blood mist, and this made him feel even greater envy. Just how many treasures were there in Ling Han's possession? Just when it looked like Ling Han's figure was about to disappear, Lin Xian could no longer hold himself back. He took a step towards the blood mist, wanting to use the Celestial King Tier seal to resist the blood mist, and then seek Ling Han out and kill him. Yet he had just taken one step when he saw that the Celestial King Tier seal immediately released blazing light, but the blood mist surged, continuously barraging the light, and causing it to rapidly dim. What? Lin Xian almost exclaimed in shock. The method that had been arranged by a seventh heaven celestial king was actually so ineffective? Just what kind of damn thing was this blood mist? Could it be that it was ninth heaven celestial king tier in level? It should be known that the spiritual mountain celestial king was no ordinary seventh heaven elite, but was capable of ranking in the middle ranks even among eighth heaven celestial kings. What could this mean? The treasure in Ling Han's hands was at the ninth heaven celestial king tier. Lin Xian's heart immediately throbbed wildly. To say nothing of him, even his master would be envious if he found out about this kind of treasure. Thus, he definitely could not allow the news to leak out, or there would be nothing left of the treasure for him. Initially, the best idea was to contact the spiritual mountain celestial king, but now Lin Xian changed his mind. He just stayed and waited outside the blood mist. In any case, this swamp was not very big. He only had to sit by and wait here, and when Ling Han came out, he could deliver a fatal strike. No matter how long it took, he would continue waiting. Ling Han entered into the depths of the swamp, and as the blood mist diffused, a great portion of the landscape affected his visibility. Even he could only see what was just 30 meters around him, and anything that surpassed this distance would only be a blurry, vague sight to him. It was completely empty inside here, but if there was anything strange, it was the fact that the swamp waters were completely blood-red in color, as if it was the evaporation of these bloody waters that had created such a large mass of blood mist. Ling Han did not know exactly how terrifying this blood mist was. Under the protection of the Celestial King tier skin, it was like he was untouchable. Ling Han was sure that if this thing could be active continuously, even a 7th heaven Celestial King bone could not do anything to him, because Xiao Gu could barely compare to an 8th heaven Celestial King. Then, even if this skin was slightly inferior, it would still be capable of matching 7th heaven Celestial King tier, right? Unfortunately, he could not activate it at all. Ha! Ling Han stood still. A dark shadow had appeared ahead of him. It was like a pillar that had been stabbed upright into the ground. What on earth is this? He set off again, and that dark shadow became clearer and clearer, while Ling Han's expression became more and more shocked. This was actually the leg of an insect, but it was not complete, and was merely a section of it. Black spikes covered the entirety of the leg, exuding an eerily cold light, and the place it had been broken off at was presently dripping with blood, and it was precisely this that was the source of the blood waters of this swamp. What's going on? Why would the ancient map lead him all the way here? Wasn't it said that there was a celestial medicine that was several 100 billion years old here? And it was this thing? If anyone were to declare that this was a celestial medicine, even if it was a celestial king, Ling Han would call him an idiot. Wang, he had walked too closely, and the broken-off leg released a ripple, which turned into millions and millions of blood insects that assaulted Ling Han. The celestial king tier skin immediately glowed, blocking these blood insects. Ling Han couldn't help but gape. Could it be that the insect leg he had previously discovered had the same origins as this thing? It was not impossible. Ling Han studied it carefully, and the spikes on the broken-off leg looked very much like an insect's leg, and if they were broken off, it was completely discernible that this was a broken-off insect leg. The insect's leg would be broken off here, and with the traces of the wound being so obvious, it had clearly been torn off with force. Then, at least 10 epochs ago, a great battle had broken out here, and an elite had had his leg torn off. Then, was one of the sides of the battle Xiao Gu's past life. This is Heavenly Venerable Tier Aura. Small Tower suddenly declared. What? Ling Han was incredibly stunned. Heavenly Venerable Tier. This insect leg was at the Heavenly Venerable Tier? Hold on. He had previously sensed the evil aura given off by those insects, and they were not recognized by the Heavenly Tao. Could it be? That's right. It's not a Heavenly Venerate that originates from this space, Small Tower stated solemnly. There is no information about this Heavenly Venerate of the foreign realm in my memory. It is highly possible that he invaded before I was even born. At this, Ling Han was really shocked. He had actually discovered the leg of a Heavenly Venerable Tier here. Though it was not the slightest bit pleasant to look at, furry and covered with spikes. Was every being in the foreign realm ugly? Going by that theory, could it be that Xiao Gu had been a Heavenly Venerate in his last life as well? That's not right. Wasn't he called the Bone Demon Celestial King? Ling Han suddenly clammed up. The Bone Demon Celestial King was Xiao Gu's last life, but it was said that he had also ascended Dao from his origins as a bone. What bone would be so powerful, to not only gain consciousness, but even ascend to become a 9th heaven Celestial King? If it was the bone left behind by a Heavenly Venerate, then there would be nothing strange about it. Heavenly Venerable Tier was really that awesome. Which also means that there hadn't actually been just 4 Heavenly Venerates in the celestial realm at that time, but rather, 5 of them. Chapter 2152. Ancient Heavenly Venerate. How many years had the celestial realm existed for? No one knew. Perhaps those 3 heavenly venerates knew, but who would dare ask them? In such a long passage of time, what would be strange about having as many as 5 or even 6 heavenly venerates appear? That's not right, Ling Han immediately said. I remember that you have said that the most terrifying battle of the invasion of the foreign realm only broke out 8 epochs ago, but this clearly is a mystery realm that has already existed since the ancient age. In terms of time, this does not match. Unless... Small Tower immediately continued. The foreign realm has long since invaded the celestial realm before. Ling Han nodded. Why had this battle never been heard of before, even when a heavenly venerate has died? There would be lapses in history. This is very normal. If the battle at that time was too tragic, leading to the deaths of all the cultivators, it is natural that the tale could not possibly be left behind. Years later, the world of cultivation was revitalized and produced a new generation, Small Tower said. Which also meant that over a dozen epochs ago, the foreign realm had already invaded, and the celestial realm of that era had managed to successfully stop them. Of course, they'd also paid an exorbitant price, but the connecting point between the 2 realms that had been opened had also been blocked. Hence, a considerable number of epochs had passed again, and this connecting point was once again opened, leading to a new wave of invasion. At that time, the foreign realm were invaders, but if the celestial realm had to pay the sacrifice of having the entire world of cultivation eliminated just to destroy the invaders, that meant that the gap in strength between both sides was extremely wide. It should be known that in a battle in the celestial realm, the foreign cultivators would be hindered by this heaven and earth, and they would not be able to draw on the regulations of this heaven and earth at all, and they managed to destroy all the cultivators of the celestial realm even then, so the gap in strength naturally could not be more obvious. Perhaps, the reason the invasion of the foreign realm ended in failure previously was because they had underestimated the strength of the celestial realm, and thought that when only a few epochs had passed, the world of cultivation of the celestial realm would not have recovered yet, and they became careless. But going by that theory, this time, the foreign realm would send out greater strength, yet there is one less heavenly venerate on the side of the celestial realm than the last time. Then, when the next great war breaks out, will the celestial realm still manage to stop them? Ling Han and Small Tower both fell silent, and felt like a heavy rock was weighing down on their hearts. It would be useless to think of these matters. I only have to concentrate on strengthening myself. Ling Han immediately regained his confidence. He wanted to become a heavenly venerate as soon as possible. Perhaps the strength of the celestial realm would still be lower than the foreign realms even when he became a heavenly venerate, but when he was qualified to join the war, he would at least be able to have control over his own fate. However, I still don't understand. Why did this ancient map, or rather this heavenly venerable tear skin, want to lead me here? Ling Han stroked his chin. Was it just to see this furry and incredibly creepy insect leg? I understand, Small Tower said suddenly. This place contains the last source power of heaven and earth that you need, Small Tower said slowly. What? Ling Han was both shocked and overjoyed. It's not an ordinary source power of heaven and earth, but rather the most mysterious and profound source power of time, Small Tower said. Oh. Ling Han nodded, not very concerned. Small Tower swayed from side to side, indicating a shake of the head. Idiot! Any regulation would be the same in Celestial King tier, and there are 9 source powers of heaven and earth, so what's so different? Ling Han explained his own rationale. Exceedingly wrong. Small Tower shook its head. Time is the most important regulation of this world, but at the same time, it is also incredibly simple. Past, present, and future. It only has these 3 changes, so there is only a single regulation of time. Only one. Ling Han also became serious. There are 9 of all the other source powers of heaven and earth, but there is only one regulations of time, which is equivalent to 9 combined into 1. Do you think that is the same? Small Tower countered. Ling Han nodded. The regulations of time should be the most valuable source power of heaven and earth. In truth, the regulations of time were also the most frightening regulations of heaven and earth. Even in the Celestial King tier, even if it could not overwhelm the other regulations of heaven and earth, it was still incredibly powerful. At first, I thought that if you could gain the 9th source power of heaven and earth, that could only be poison, but I never thought that this unique and sole source power of time would actually appear here. Small Tower appeared extremely stunned. Which also means that the karmic life Heavenly Venerable had also not managed to obtain the regulations of time then? Ling Han asked. Of course. Small Tower had never been one to give Ling Han any face. Ling Han did not take it to heart. He naturally knew that this was speaking nonsense, but to be capable of surpassing the karmic life Heavenly Venerable in some aspect made him feel very pleased. Otherwise, he would keep feeling that he was just walking the latter's path, one step at a time, and nothing had changed in the slightest. He did not want to do that. He wanted to walk his own path. Then where is the source power of time? Ling Han asked, seeming slightly anxious. Once he obtained the source power of time, he would immediately enter into the Black Tower for seclusion, and directly form his ninth divided soul. Then, he would come out to beat up the idiot Lin Xian. Since this map has led you here, the answer naturally lies within it, Small Tower said, practically pushing all the responsibility onto the map. Ling Han took up the map, and again poured his divine sense inside, searching for the means to obtain the source power of time. Wang, the Heavenly Venerable Tear skin exploded in light, and that seal released even more brilliant light. A supreme aura instantly enshrouded the entire mystery realm. So what if they were 8th heaven or 7th heaven celestial kings? Their hearts still shuddered wildly, as if they were faced with a great foe. However, this aura was controlled so that it was only felt within the range of the mystery realm. Otherwise, if it spread out, it would probably draw a few supreme beings over. For example, the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. Boom, that insect's leg glowed eerily, releasing an attack towards the Heavenly Venerable Tear skin. These two existences were both at the Heavenly Venerable Tear years ago, and while their owners had obviously died by now, the little bit that was left behind was still extremely terrifying. If it were not for the fact that he was protected by the Heavenly Venerable Tear skin, Ling Han would definitely have long since been ground into dust. However, Ling Han also had a Heavenly Venerable Tear tool. He only had to enter into the Black Tower, and he was sure that there should be no problem for it to just match the remains of a Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han discovered that this Heavenly Venerable Tear skin was actually destroying the aura of the insect leg. No, destroying was not an appropriate word. Both sides were more or less equal, and neither could suppress the other. Thus, they were canceling each other out. The seal on the Heavenly Venerable Tear skin became dimmer and dimmer, and the flow of blood from the insect leg also became dimmer. Finally, when a certain point was reached, boom, the Heavenly Venerable Tear skin in Ling Han's hands burned fiercely, and was instantly burnt into ashes, no longer existing in this world, and the insect's leg also stopped bleeding. It rapidly decomposed, and turned into ash which dissolved in the waters. Thankfully, there was still a streak of light on Ling Han. That was what the Heavenly Venerable Tear skin had bestowed on him before disappearing, which continued to protect him from being corroded by the blood mist. Just at this moment, Ling Han sensed a different aura. Source power of heaven and earth. Though each and every source power of heaven and earth was different, since they were all birthed from the heaven and earth and were manifestations of great Tao, it was natural that they would have similarities in their essence. Thus, he could immediately confirm that this was the aura of a source power of heaven and earth. It was suppressed beneath the insect leg. At the time, the Heavenly Venerate of the foreign realm should have died together with Xiao Gu's past incarnation, but before it died, it had still used its corpse to suppress the source power of time, and Xiao Gu's past version had taken the form of a layer of skin, which refined itself into a map to guide future visitors to come to this place to retrieve the source power of heaven and earth. The two great Heavenly Venerates both went to so much effort, and this was proof enough of the importance of the source power of time. If it was obtained by the foreign realm, it would definitely cause a massive blow to the celestial realm, and if Ling Han obtained it, then he would gain endless benefits. Chapter 2153. Source Power of Time. Ling Han guided his divine sense to attract the source power of time. His brow furrowed in a tight frown because he discovered that this source power of heaven and earth had sustained serious injury, and gave a slight feeling of being close to death. That torn limb from the foreign realm Heavenly Venerate has been suppressing it all this while, and it has not been destroyed, because the source power of time is too strong. If it had been any other source power, it would have been erased who knows how long ago, Small Tower explained. Indeed, just how many epochs had already passed. However, the heavenly venerable tear was really strong. Just a severed limb was actually capable of completely subduing a source power of heaven and earth, and it was the source power of time that was 9 combined into 1 at that, and had further almost been destroyed completely. Though destroying the source power of time here could only strike a blow to the heaven and earth, and could not enlarge the connecting point between the two realms, the foreign realm heavenly venerate was going to die anyways, so it was still better than nothing. Right, the corpses that had just recently died previously seemed as if they had been corroded for several 100 billion years. Was it also because of the source power of time? The severed limb had suppressed the source power of time, its insect poison invading the body. Who knew? It might have also brought with it some sliver of the regulations of time, making it seem as if 100 billion years had passed once a person was dead. Ling Han first tossed all his curiosity to one side. Now, the priority was naturally to retrieve the source power of time. In that way, he would be able to gather all 9 source powers of heaven and earth, and cultivate to the astonishing level of dividing 9 souls. Without forming 9 divided souls, one could never attain the heavenly venerable tier. Ling Han focused fully on stimulating the source power of time. This was much too important. Previously, he had gained 6 source powers of heaven and earth in a single stroke, so much that he was slightly numbed from it, and did not feel all that much exhilaration about it. But now, he had become both excited and nervous, filled with unease. He definitely had to get it. It was unknown whether it was the injuries the source power of time had sustained that were too serious, or it was simply disdaining from giving him any regard, but it completely ignored him altogether. Even when he was channeling the indestructible heaven scroll, it was useless. He was just about to come closer and make another attempt when the heavenly venerable tear light that enshrouded him moved, and joined in the ranks of promoters on his behalf. At first, the source power of time was lazy and laid back, but all of a sudden, it became excited, and danced in happiness, as if it had met an old friend. Xiao, a streak of light shot out from the ground, and headed towards Ling Han. Ling Han could see very clearly. That was a living being that could not be described with words. It was as tiny as a fist and completely transparent, oozing the air of time. It was as if it existed in the present, but at the same time seemed to be in the future, and simultaneously seemed as if it was in the past. Time is the mightiest power. If the source power of time itself is not willing, even a heavenly venerate could not retrieve it, and can only destroy it, Small Tower explained calmly. And just as it was speaking, that tiny creature shot out, and sank with a flash into the top of Ling Han's head, entering into his mind. Wang, Ling Han immediately felt his body shudder. Indescribable energy was spreading out in his body. He saw the origins of time in the primitive age, and also witnessed the great prosperity of cultivation in the ancient age. Time passed, but the only thing that would remain unchanging was time itself. He had an enlightenment that could not be described. He felt as if he only had to break through this barrier, and he would be able to ascend Tao. Tisk! Small Tower suddenly exclaimed lightly, immediately causing Ling Han to come back to his senses. Brat, if you had continued, you would have been dead. Ling Han looked at his body. Skin and flesh had all formed multiple seals, as if he was going to be refined by regulations. He couldn't help but feel astonished. That previous feeling was actually a test from the source power of time. If he could not pass this test, he would be assimilated into the regulations of heaven and earth. To be assimilated with regulations was putting it nicely. With his presently limited strength, how could he possibly influence the heaven and earth? It would be like a drop of water falling into a great ocean, and his only fate would be absorbed by the ocean. Ling Han couldn't help but exclaim at his good luck. If he had not had the heavenly venerable tear light helping him, he probably wouldn't have been able to retrieve this source power of heaven and earth at all. It had experienced the primitive age and the ancient age, and it was highly possible that it had existed since the beginning of time and had never been destroyed. It was from the very beginning generation. And if Small Tower had not spoken up in time, he would possibly have died, and disappeared from now onwards. So close. At first, he had thought that the source power of time, which was 9 combined into 1, would be incredibly hard to retrieve. But firstly, he had the help of the heavenly venerable tear light, and secondly, this source power of heaven and earth had been suppressed for more than a dozen epochs, so its injuries were too severe. Thus, after it gave Ling Han a token test, it directly entered into his dantian, and began to compete for territory. Though its injuries were severe, it was a source power that was 9 combined into 1, so its qualifications were genuine. Even with the other 8 source powers combining forces, they only just managed to battle it to a tie. Thus, this guy managed to occupy half the space within his dantian, while the other source powers were all forced to one side. Too overbearing, too domineering. Ling Han used his divine sense to carefully examine. The source power of time had turned into a small beast that looked like a deer, then a turtle, and then a tiger. It was endlessly shifting form, and seemed as if it existed in the present, in the future, and in the past all at the same time. It could not be grasped at all. Small Tower couldn't help but feel rueful. The source power of time is the most amazing source power of heaven and earth. It is no easy matter for even a heavenly venerable tier to capture it. It could exist in the present, but could also be in the past and future, and even a heavenly venerate could not possibly turn the flow of time, so he naturally would not be able to do anything to it. Ling Han deduced that this source power of heaven and earth had followed Xiao Gu's last incarnation, but in the battle with the foreign realm heavenly venerate, the 2 great heavenly venerates had died together, while it was suppressed by the severed limb of the foreign realm heavenly venerate, and almost destroyed. Some truths could never be proven, and it only mattered that they could be rationalized. Ling Han did not bother to get serious either. What was the most important was the outcome, and the outcome was that he had obtained the 9th source power of heaven and earth, and had completed his collection. Alright, now he would aim for the 9th divided soul, and that Lin Xian, just wait to be destroyed into bits. No! Small Tower immediately said. Why? Ling Han asked. Though the severed limb of the heavenly venerate has already been destroyed, the power of the heavenly venerate is still here. This blood mist can exist for at least a few more epochs, but the heavenly venerable tier light that you have can be maintained for only a few more days at most. If you begin seclusion now, then when you come back out, how will you rush out of the blood mist? Small Tower countered. Right. Unless you can cultivate to the 9th heaven. In that case, you would be able to resist this kind of blood mist, Small Tower continued. This naturally was impossible. Ling Han nodded, and then left this place. As long as he exited the range of the blood mist, he would immediately enter into the Black Tower, and aim for dividing 9 souls. He did as he said. With a flash, he was already going back the way he had come from. Lin Xian was seated, his eyes closed slightly, but his divine sense had surrounded the whole vicinity of the swamp. No matter where Ling Han came out from, he would be able to sense it at the first instance, and then snipe him. He swore that he would kill this man whose threat to him was overwhelming. Of course, he could only surround the outside boundaries of the blood mist. Naturally, he did not dare to touch the blood mist itself. Upon contact, his divine sense would immediately be corroded. That thing was too terrifying, capable of easily destroying even the celestial light of a 7th heaven celestial king. Ha! He realized that the initially calm blood mist was suddenly swirling, and then saw a young man stride out. His figure was tall and lanky, and an indescribable light was flickering on him, as if it was capable of suppressing the heavens. This was none other than Ling Han. But that wasn't right. Why did he feel the urge to fall to his knees in front of the other? That powerful feeling of helplessness was even stronger than what he felt when he was in front of his master. His master was a 7th heaven celestial king. Chapter 2154. Breaking through to dividing 9 souls. Lin Xian roared, and forcibly chased away the fear in his heart. Because he was now even greedier, and wanted to obtain everything that Ling Han had, and take it for himself, which would help him soar. As he saw it, the reason why Ayn Ran was stronger than him was merely because she had a master who was a 9th heaven celestial king. If he, too, could possess a secret treasure that was on the level of 9th heaven, he would definitely not be weaker than Ayn Ran. Die! He roared and charged over. Ling Han did not dodge or evade, and merely smiled at him, showing a mouthful of snow-white teeth. Fuck! Lin Xian was angered, and his spear struck quickly. The green dragon howled, exploding with endless might. Kill, 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 kill. He wielded the spear in a piercing strike, and wanted to kill Ling Han with it. Pooh! The piercing strike landed, yet Lin Xian showed an expression of incomparable shock. This piercing strike was actually blocked by that layer of light outside of Ling Han's body, and caused his hands to go numb, and his entire body to shudder, as if every bit of muscle was about to fall off his body. Ling Han moved, and delivered a slap right at his face. Lin Xian knew that Ling Han had a deadly strike like the great clash of source powers, so how could he possibly be unprepared? Immediately, he rapidly retreated with a bounce of his feet. He had successfully evaded this strike, but his expression was very ugly. If Ling Han had used the great clash of source powers, he naturally would not have taken it to heart, but the former had simply wanted to slap him. Just what kind of profound contempt was that? But what was going on with this light? It was like the heavenly Tao itself was showering sympathy and protection, causing him to shudder. He felt as if becoming enemies with Ling Han was opposing the heaven and earth. Cultivating in this heaven and earth, how could he possibly defy the heavens? This had to be a treasure that Ling Han had obtained inside the blood mist. It had to be. His jealousy became even more pronounced. This should have been his, all of it was his. You're quite fast at dodging, Ling Han said with a laugh. Taking advantage of this time when the heavenly venerable tear light had not disappeared, and his defenses were invincible, he rushed towards Lin Xian. He did not have the intention to injure him, but just repeatedly delivered slaps at the latter's face. Lin Xian exploded in fury. As the saying went, even in a battle, don't aim for the face, but Ling Han was purposely targeting his face. Just what kind of humiliation was this? Most importantly, Ling Han was just a mere dividing soul tear, and he actually dared to slap the face of a first secret monarch tear like himself. If he did not kill Ling Han, how would he be able to face others in the future? What are you being so arrogant for? You just managed to luckily obtain a treasure, Lin Xian retorted in defiance. Thus you can only envy from the sidelines, Ling Han stated calmly. Scrambling so closely behind me, aren't you just jealous and coveting the treasure I possess? Too bad for you, it's not yours. I won't believe that you can continuously channel this kind of treasure, Lin Xian declared fiercely. Though he could not do anything to Ling Han, neither could Ling Han do anything to him. After all, the gap in their cultivation levels was clear to see, and the battle could not be won just because Ling Han had invincible defenses. The two men battled intensely. In truth, this was just a farce. Ling Han wanted to slap Lin Xian's face, while Lin Xian was just dodging here and there, not allowing himself to be slapped. If this spread out, it would be practically comical. A dividing soul tier was facing up to an immortal palace tier, but it was actually the immortal palace tier elite that was scrambling away from his blows. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. When half of the 4th day was up, the heavenly venerable tear light on Ling Han suddenly and rapidly trembled, and then disappeared. Time was up. Both Ling Han and Lin Xian faltered, and then Lin Xian laughed loudly. As expected, you are no longer able to activate that treasure. Ling Han, surrender your life. He wielded his spear in a counterattack. This anger that he had suppressed for more than 3 days could finally be unleashed. Idiot, Ling Han said casually, and then he already vanished inside the Black Tower with a flash. This was not because he was avoiding the battle, but simply because he wanted to play around with Lin Xian. When he next came out, he would become serious, and would kill the latter. Lin Xian's piercing strike passed, yet completely missed his target. Where is he? The man was shocked. Had his opponent used some kind of secret technique, and directly fled? That was not right. Lin Xian had clearly not sensed any ripples in the regulations of space, so how could Ling Han have possibly fled? Or was it rather some kind of smokescreen? But if it was just a smokescreen, how could Lin Xian have only pierced empty space with his strike? If it was only a smokescreen, it could only deceive the eyes and divine sense, but could not evade attack. A spatial god tool? Impossible. A spatial god tool was inferior to the strength of even one-star pseudo-celestial tool. With his strike, the resultant shock wave only had to scrape it a bit, and that spatial god tool would definitely have exploded. There would have been nowhere for Ling Han left to hide. But when all other impossibilities had been excluded, the only remaining possibility was actually 0, and he was stumped at this. He must have used some kind of celestial king tier method. Lin Xian deduced. If he had been able to escape, then he would not have needed to walk out of the blood mist previously, but would just simply have left directly. Hence, he must have hidden in some corner in the vicinity. If I thought that he had left, I would fall for his deception. Hence, I will first pretend to leave, and then monitor from a distance. Hi's cultivation level is beneath mine, so there is absolutely no way that he could discover that I am nearby. Additionally, he chose to flee instead of standing against me, which means that this Celestial King tier method can only be used to save his own life. Otherwise, why would he have needed to flee? Lin Xian calmed his emotions, and formed connections for all that had happened until now, obtaining a deduction that he thought matched the truth the most. With a tap of his feet, he went into the distance. He appeared to have given up and left, but in reality, he was waiting on the sidelines. Within the Black Tower, Ling Han paid no regard to what Lin Xian was thinking. He presently was going to cultivate dividing 9 souls, and solidify the foundations for the heavenly venerable tier. Let me tell you a piece of good news. Small tower appeared, its body swaying slightly. With the introduction of the source power of time, the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower can be increased 100 times. In other words, 1 day is equivalent to 100,000 days? Ling Han was extremely pleasantly surprised. That's right. Furthermore, that is still because the source power of time is injured. When it has fully recovered, these acceleration effects could be further increased. Small Tower gave Ling Han a greater hope. Ling Han naturally was overjoyed. What he lacked the most was time. With enough time, he could catch up to those prodigies that had been established long ago, and could even ascend Dao and become a celestial king a few epochs earlier than expected. And now, when 1 year passed in the outside world, Ling Han could cultivate inside the Black Tower for 100,000 years. This was too useful. He immediately sat down in a cross-legged position, and began cultivating. Shang Ji-wei treated him like a son or nephew, and gave him copious amounts of cultivation resources. And she was also a mighty figure that had the right to know of the level of heavenly venerable tier, so she naturally had an incredibly high opinion of Ling Han, and did not think that Heaven's Soul would be the final point for Ling Han on this major tier. Thus, the cultivation resources she gave Ling Han had far surpassed the norms, with her clearly wanting to help him to reach the level of dividing 9 souls. Ling Han sighed softly. The more he gained from Shang Ji-wei, the more difficult his position would be in future. But at this moment in time, he really could not refuse. Forget about it, he should just cultivate first. He cultivated inside the Black Tower, and this was different from being underneath the reincarnation tree, where the time acceleration effects could only take effect on the spiritual level. Instead, it was effective on his whole person. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, and Ling Han's cultivation level began spiking madly. With the support of a great amount of resources, Ling Han's accumulation of origin power exploded like a volcanic eruption, and there were 9 source powers of heaven and earth within his body, leading to him experiencing absolutely no problems with the comprehension of regulations. This was a precious treasure that even a celestial king would covet and could benefit from. Even if it was an idiot, his cultivation level would soar after obtaining this. What more when it was Ling Han? 9,000 years later, Ling Han cultivated to the peak stage of Heaven's Soul, and began breaking through to the dividing 5 souls level that a limited few had broken through to in history. Ji Wuming struck himself in the severing mundane tier, and achieved the cultivation level of 9th Heaven Celestial King. He is determined to break through to the heavenly venerable tier, and is definitely capable of forming 9 divided souls. I definitely cannot fall back behind him. Chapter 2155. Success. Cultivate, cultivate and more cultivating. 15,000 years later, Ling Han formed his 6th divided soul. 22,000 years later, he formed his 7th divided soul. Within the Black Tower, the flow of time was 100,000 times faster than in the outside world. What surprised Ling Han was the fact that beyond the 5th divided soul, He did not need any specific item to become a bearer for his divided soul, nor did any heavenly tribulation descend, as if this kind of cultivation level was completely non-existent. But Ling Han could indeed feel that every time he broke through, his strength would soar greatly. But no matter how strong he became, he kept feeling like there was still a long way to go before reaching the immortal palace tier. He could not overcome this barrier no matter how much he tried. It looked like qualitative change would only take place after reaching dividing 9 souls. 30,000 years later, Ling Han formed his 8th divided soul. There was only the last one left. Ling Han continued to cultivate, but the final stage was unexpectedly difficult to break through. 100,000 years, 300,000 years, 1,000,000 years. Ling Han was still cultivating hard. He was completely stuck on this stage. No, looks like this is not something that can be broken through to with merely cultivating, Ling Han thought, and then said, there has to be a trigger. Great joy, great grief, fury, and fighting spirit all can help me to break through this wall. That's right. That idiot must still be standing guard outside, so I'll go and play some more with him. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, and in a mere instant, he heard a loud laugh. A long spear was shockingly attacking, as if it had torn through space, and was instantly piercing towards his chest. Lin Xian indeed had not left, and had been standing guard all this while. 1,000,000 years had passed within the Black Tower, but only 10 years had passed in the outside world. To a first secret monarch tier, this little bit of time spent waiting was naturally no big deal. Did you think you managed to deceive me? Lin Xian smirked coldly. This brat was really very patient, to have actually hidden himself for more than 10 years. Too bad. His patience was even better. For the treasure of a 9th heaven celestial king, to say nothing of 10 years, even if it was 1,000,000,000 years, he would still have the patience to wait. What celestials lacked the least was time. Ling Han laughed, and raised a fist to parry. Pooh! A blood-red light flashed over his fist. Even with his physique, he was still incapable of matching the destructive power of an immortal palace tier, and some skin had been sliced. Blood spurted, and he himself was also sent flying. However, Lin Xian was astonished. Ling Han's strength had actually increased countless times over. Though he had not reached the level of the immortal palace tier yet, he seemed to be just a hair's breadth away. Impossible! No matter how weak an immortal palace tier was, he would be able to suppress the strongest heaven soul. This was a reality that would never change for eternity, yet Ling Han seemed to have broken the trend of this reality. He had already increased his strength by so much just by going into isolation for 10 years, then what about going into isolation for another 10 years, or 100 years? Was he going to become heaven-defying? Impossible. Impossible. Lin Xian comforted himself internally. An immortal palace tier was definitely capable of suppressing a heaven soul, and he was a first secret monarch tier, stronger than the ordinary first secret immortal palace tiers by 2 minor levels, so it was absolutely impossible that Ling Han could turn the tables on him. I definitely cannot allow you to live. His killing intent blazed. This brat was too freakish. Even if he could not break the iron rules of the cultivation world, what if he did really break through to the immortal palace tier? Thankfully, there was no mystery realm for the immortal palace tier here, or he would really have to worry. Pang, pang, pang. Yet Ling Han had no distracting thoughts, and only blazed his fighting spirit as he fought with Lin Xian. This battle continued for 3 months, and Ling Han was completely battered from his battle. Only when he was completely incapable of fighting any longer did he then enter into the Black Tower. Ah! Lin Xian howled furiously towards the heavens. Just when it looked like he was about to kill Ling Han, the latter had used some kind of method to disappear again, causing all his effort to go to waste, and him to almost explode in fury. But what else could he do? Only continue waiting. Within the Black Tower, as Ling Han healed his injuries, he thought back to the battle, causing his fighting spirit to blaze. Presently, he felt no great joy or grief, and the kind of trash like Lin Xian could not possibly enrage him, either. Thus, he only had the option of fighting spirit left to him. Half a year passed inside the Black Tower, and Ling Han charged out. Without wasting words, he launched an offensive against Lin Xian. Only a short while had passed in the outside world. Thus, Lin Xian had not even warmed his seat when he saw Ling Han revitalized and launching an attack at him. Fuck! Lin Xian could only counter immediately, and battled Ling Han. The time for this battle was much shorter, and only took a month. Ling Han withdrew from battle, and went into the Black Tower. Though this battle had taken a short time, it was more intense, and the injuries Ling Han sustained were no lighter than his previous wounds. He recuperated for another 3 months, and then appeared once more to battle Lin Xian. Battle, recuperate, and he went through this cycle repeatedly. Ling Han had the Black Tower, and with the time acceleration effects, he had enough time to recuperate, but it was different for Lin Xian. He had just battled with Ling Han, and had not even gotten his breath back when the latter came back again. The endless repetition of this not only filled him with weariness, he felt an indescribable irritation too. And right at this moment, Ling Han's fighting spirit had also accumulated to the pinnacle. This time, he began a long period of isolation after entering the Black Tower. A whole 100,000 years later, Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open. There were 9 great daos entwined around his body, exuding a supreme aura. He had succeeded in dividing 9 souls, and he had practically reached a height that no one had reached before him. By now, he was equivalent to a first secret immortal palace tier. Ling Han jumped up to his feet, and laughed out loud. By now, he was equivalent to a first secret, so when he truly broke through to the immortal palace tier, he would be capable of suppressing ordinary fourth secrets at least. Dividing 9 souls, even one was rare to come by in a few epochs. If it was not extremely awesome, how could it be deserving of so many source powers of heaven and earth within Ling Han's body? I'll use that idiot as a power test. This time, Ling Han brought the Empress, Hu Niu, and the other women with him out of the Black Tower. He now had absolute certainty that he could suppress Lin Xian, and naturally needed not fear having the 4 women come out. Moreover, this place had once possessed the might of heavenly venerable tier, and he was sure that even the divine sense of the spiritual mountain celestial king could not possibly touch this area. Ling Han! Lin Xian called out loudly. He was fuming mad, and even his eyes were bloodshot. Do you dare battle up front with me once and for all? Ling Han laughed loudly. Is there something wrong with your brain? Just how many times have I battled with you already by now? Lin Xian completely lost his wits from his extreme fury as well. Indeed, Ling Han fought him fiercely every time he came out, and it was a head-on confrontation, as if he was not weaker than him. But when he fought towards the end, he would always run off. Such cowardly acts could also be considered being upfront and forthright. He glanced at the Empress and the others, appearing very confused. What is the meaning of this? To actually bring out the people inside your spatial god tool? What are you playing at now? Ling Han snapped his fingers. After fighting for so long, there should be a conclusion by now. Have you decided to accept your death? Lin Xian laughed coldly. He was naturally not going to believe Ling Han's words. This guy would definitely fight for a while, and then disappear without a trace again. You had better save these words for yourself. Ling Han moved. Boom! 9 divided souls showed their might inside his body, pouring frightening power into him, and causing a qualitative change to take place in his battle prowess. Boom! This strike caused even the weather to rage. What? Lin Xian paled in great shock. This attack from Ling Han truly possessed the might of the immortal palace tier. Hurriedly, he parried with his spear, and the tip of the spear clashed with Ling Han's fist. A frightening force assaulted the spear, the impact causing him to involuntarily retreat in succession. He finally managed to stop after retreating for a whole 137 steps. For an elite like himself, retreating 1 step was a good few miles, so what kind of unbelievable concept was 137 steps? And looking back at Ling Han, the latter had only retreated 106 steps. The gap between them was clear at a glance. Chapter 2156. Power of Darkness. Impossible. 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 Lin Xian's head was filled with stars, his whole person completely dumbfounded. Ling Han was definitely a dividing soul tier, and the aura he exuded was clear proof of that. If he could not even distinguish this face, then Lin Xian would not deserve the status of a first secret monarch tier. But how could a dividing soul tier be so powerful? Matching a first secret, and not an ordinary first secret at that, but rather a first secret monarch tier. In fact, Ling Han even had the upper hand. Lin Xian felt as if the sky was falling down on him, the iron rules of cultivation completely collapsing. Ling Han, on the other hand, frowned slightly. His physique had not improved alongside his battle prowess, but was merely close to the level of 5-star pseudo-divine metal. Thus, in a head-on clash of force against a 5-star pseudo-celestial tool, his skin had still been penetrated. It was only his skin breaking, so the wound was not to the point of severe injury. Fine. He already had the upper hand in terms of battle prowess. Moreover, he had not used his true deadly move yet. Great clash of source powers. With a tap of his feet, he charged towards Lin Xian. Boom, he continuously sped up, and suddenly surpassed his limits. This was the source power of time, and he sped up the flow of time for himself. As quick as light, he instantly arrived in front of Lin Xian, and shot out a punch. A powerful feeling of danger assaulted Lin Xian, causing him to temporarily dismiss the shock in his heart, and wield his spear to counter. Otherwise, he would definitely be blasted into smithereens. Pang, pang, pang. The two great monarch tiers clashed. One was a first secret, while the other was a dividing 9 souls, and in terms of cultivation level, that was practically equal. Then, it would depend on who had perfected their cultivation level more. Obviously, this person would be Ling Han. He was an overlord of monarch tiers and practically a unique existence in any era. However, there was Ji Wuming in this life, so there was someone who could match Ling Han within his own cultivation level. Ji Wuming would probably muse ruefully like this as well. He, too, was a unique monarch of monarchs. Ling Han rained down punches furiously. His stamina had directly soared to the ascending origin tier, and this could support him in endlessly brandishing his fists, launching attacks at a frequency that was far above a first secret elite's. Lin Xian stepped back repeatedly, his face both enraged and shocked, both astonished and fearful. He discovered that Ling Han really had the ability to kill him. No, he could not die here. If he could defeat Ling Han, then he would not tell anyone, and kill Ling Han, snatching all the treasures the latter possessed. But if he could not do so, he could only give up on this tempting idea, and seek his master's help. He was sure with the precious treasure of a 9th heaven celestial king as a temptation, even the spiritual mountain celestial king would dismiss the reservations he felt towards Shangji Wei, and commit murder just to snatch this treasure. His only thought now was to kill Ling Han. He was incredibly decisive. He had just finished the thought when he immediately raised his spear in a charge, wanting to grasp a way of survival for himself. Ling Han smirked coldly, his right hand spreading open. The power of time activated, and Lin Xian's speed was abruptly slowed down endlessly. Lin Xian roared, and delivered a palm strike at his own chest, arousing the blood essence in his heart, which took the form of a shield of light. It cancelled out the regulations of time, and his figure immediately sped up. However, he had only taken a few steps, and couldn't help but stop in astonishment. He was actually just taking steps in his original position. Regulations of space. He turned around, and looked at Ling Han as if he was looking at a demon. How could this be possible? A brat that was only a heaven soul had actually grasped the power of time, and at the same time possessed the regulations of space. How could others live with this? Ling Han broke into a smile. I'm really sorry. I have grasped practically all the regulations there are. Possessing corresponding source powers of heaven and earth was equivalent to his containing the Tao of heaven and earth inside his body. This was naturally terrifying. Lin Xian took a deep breath. He had a realization that it was impossible for him to flee from Ling Han's hands. Then his only option was to battle. Ling Han, you forced me to do this, he said as his hands gripped his spear. Boom, a black chi actually burst from his body, and his entire aura immediately changed, becoming incredibly cold and evil. This was... Ling Han's killing intent immediately blazed. Damn you, you have actually cultivated the cultivation of the foreign realm. A monarch tier like him should not be unaware that cultivating the alternate system of cultivation would cause harm to this heaven and earth, yet he had still learned it. Wrong. Lin Xian declared proudly, a dark image that could not be named appearing in the pupils of his eyes, exuding endless evil. From the very beginning, I have been cultivating the techniques of the foreign realm, and it was afterwards that I joined the Four Seas Palace. Ling Han's fingers involuntarily twitched. Going by that explanation, Lin Xian was actually a spy of the Force of Darkness then. Since the Four Seas Palace contained someone like Lin Xian, then what about the other forces? Unknowingly, the Force of Darkness had actually permeated so deep into the celestial realm. Not only were there people promoting belief of the deity on a large scale among the lower ranks, there were also beings like Lin Xian in the high-end Force of Darkness, and it was highly possible that he could become a higher-up in the future. In the future, when the foreign realm invaded once more, these infiltrators would take advantage of the opportunity to bewitch the others, and greatly hold their forces back. In the first place, the strength of the celestial realm was already lower. Then, wouldn't that result in complete defeat? It looked like after they had experienced the setbacks of the previous time, the foreign realm had also adjusted their strategy, and they were no longer just attacking with brute force. You are a member of the celestial realm, yet have done something that would harm the entire celestial realm. You deserve death. Ling Han declared balefully, his killing intent boiling over. There was black qi endlessly gushing out of Lin Xian's body. This was an alternate power, and was incredibly strong. However, it was also because of this power that he had been abandoned by the heaven and earth, and could no longer draw on the regulations of heaven and earth. I am a true prodigy, and the power of darkness has been sealed in me since childhood. Oh, this is the name that people of your realm call it. Whilst cultivating celestial techniques, I too have not forgotten to cultivate the power of darkness. If it was not because of the seal, and that I have used power that I should not, how could I possibly lose to anyone? Hearing his declarations, Ling Han was inwardly shocked. Since Lin Xian had managed to become the disciple of the spiritual mountain celestial king, he naturally had to have gone through strict inspections, yet the spiritual mountain celestial king actually had not managed to tell there was something off about him. Who was the one who had placed this seal? It was so powerful. However, whatever, he would just beat him until he burst. Ling Han summoned the divine demon sword, and as the sword swiped out, it swept towards Lin Xian's head. How are you capable of matching me when I have activated the power of darkness? Lin Xian laughed loudly. He commenced a direct sweep of his spear, using it like he would use a rod. He had given up the power of a celestial tool, and was merely using the overbearing nature of the pseudo-divine metal itself. It was because he could no longer activate the pseudo-celestial tool. The cultivation of the other realm was naturally incompatible with this realm. However, not only was the force of this strike no weaker than his original battle prowess, it had instead risen considerably. If Anran was here, she would definitely experience a great shock. The other party's battle prowess was just about equal to her own. Pang! The sword and spear clashed, creating a round of brilliant sparks. A shock wave also spread out from the clash. Pang, pang, pang. A layer of the ground had been scraped off from the pure impact. The smile on Lin Xian's face immediately vanished, and he once again showed an expression of disbelief. That was because even if he had activated the power of darkness, he was actually still no match for Ling Han. Why was it like this? Shouldn't the power of darkness be at a higher level than the overall level of cultivation of this realm? And his cultivation level was also higher than Ling Han's, so why was he still no match for Ling Han? It was completely unreasonable. His expression was completely vacant. The confidence that he had just established crumbled once more, and it collapsed completely this time, both inside and out. Ignorant! Ling Han exclaimed lightly. The divine demon sword moved, its sword chi filling the skies. Facing someone like Lin Xian, there was no need for him to feel any pity. Die! You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.